Hello, everyone. This is not a story for the faint of heart. Today, we will be stepping into the darkness of the most gruesome cases, where evil not only exists, but also leaves bloody and haunting traces. This is Real Gruesome Murder Cases, a series of true stories about murders that made the whole world shudder. If you are ready to face the cold truth and the gruesome corners of humanity, come with me to delve deeper into each case. The Interstellar Murder Hobo, First Trooper Lundgren Morrissey, Constabulary Grid. 7H6 of Earth's solar militia woke drowsily from what felt like a thick fog tinged green with a mild sense of nausea. He wasn't uncomfortable, but understood the night was over, and his hangover was coming, slowly creeping into his body from a distance. What did I do last night? I remember the girl Adrian sent, and drinking, so much drinking. He didn't feel much concern over his lack of memory. It wasn't his first blackout. Some memories always returned, and there was the footage to look forward to. He furrowed his brow as slowly growing behind his eyes, expanding over the top of his head. A headache made its presence known. It grew rapidly into a solid thump, forcing a hot gush of saliva flood his mouth, literally blushing his face with heat at the same time. Unable to control his own body, he rocked upwards to vomit, only to find himself restrained by the wrists above his head. With a viscous blub, the vomit tried to project, only to flop back into his mouth, down his chin, neck, and chest. This just induced another almighty heave, this time sensibly spilling it to his right. It pooled against his cheek. He slowly turned his face to the left in a lethargic bid to find reprieve. He took a moment to catch his breath and tried to open his eyes. The room was pitch black, and he questioned whether he had opened them at all. What did I let myself get into last night? He tried moving his legs and found them restrained as well. Ugh, enough of this. Hello, he croaked, his throat dry. The vomit had settled in the wells of his body weight, coating the back of his neck, sticking viscously to his right cheek and chin. He was getting annoyed that the girl had left him like this. He thrashed his whole body in a vain attempt to break out with brute force, to no avail. He just soiled himself even further. Just as he cleared his throat to shout, a stark light flashed on, and a steady, mature female voice spoke. Oh, for fuck's sake. It held no emotion. I guess we'll need to clean this up before we begin. You drank too much. My dosage off. Lundgren tried to get a look at her, squinting his eyes against the light, exacerbating his headache. She was small, no taller than 5 feet, and very slight. Definitely not the girl Adrian sent. He didn't recognize her at all, but only really cared to consider his odds. I have the advantage. I just need to wait. I am going to give you a paralytic I designed whilst doing a job on Io's Gravitech station. It works almost instantly, clears you up, suppresses your emotions, and has no nasty side effects. It requires a continuous dose, though, so I'll add it to an IV. I'll restore some electrolytes while we're at it. He tried in vain to discern a tone in her voice. What do you mean by paralytic? His senses were returning to him, but only just. Did we, fuck or something? I am digging the bondage vibe and the aftercare, but I would like to be untied now. Oh, that's not a very good idea. At least not till you're fully paralyzed. The matter-of-fact tone sent a slight shiver down his spine. And no, we didn't, fuck or anything. The mimicry of his voice we perfect for tone and inflection. I need to clean you up, and to do that, I need to untie you. To do that, I would feel better if you weren't able to move. I trust my logic is clear. Lundgren considered his cool head under pressure a source of personal pride, which is why when panic started to tighten his chest, he was totally unprepared. His body froze as she stepped closer with a needle and IV bag in hand. He had no clue where they came from. It was like they had just materialized. He blinked to clear his vision a bit more and watched as she deftly penetrated a vein on the back of his right hand with a needle, just as matter-of-factly as her words dug into his heart. She pinned the tube to his wrist with a programmable medi-strap and hung the bag on a hook on the wall. "What do you want with me?" he asked, craning his head to take a look at his surroundings. It was a stark white room with a titanium water cylinder, a sonic hygiene basin and workstation to his right. The roof was made entirely of large rectangular light panels, and there was an assortment of hooks on the wall. There were no other items in the room. She didn't answer his question. "Both the paralytic and IV will take effect soon. Then we can begin." "What's the rush?" he asked. She smiled softly, locking eyes with him. "We're on a schedule." "How long have I been out?" "Oh, about 3 hours, maybe a bit longer." Lundgren noticed the first hint of emotion. Excitement? "Just long enough for me to drug you and get you here. I must commend you on your choice of location. Ganymede really has very little law enforcement." "Where's Adrian?" "I don't find this funny anymore." "Adrian's busy, and you are right to not be amused." She chuckled. It was soft and deep. "Did you know I walked out of that bar with your body draped over my shoulder? I just got into my shuttle and no one said a word. We are on the far side of Ganymede right now, in an uncharted crater. If you wanted to scream, no one would hear you." Lundgren was not ready to accept what he was being told. "I call bullshit on that." He even managed a laugh. "There is no way you could have carried me out. Look at you." He gestured at her with his eyes only. The paralytic really did work fast. She just smiled. "You are understandably confused. I suppose I could clarify by getting to the point." She closed her eyes as if she genuinely considering how to continue. As she opened them, she looked him right in his eyes. "I understand all of Earth's troopers are educated on the interstellar murder hobo?" "Yes." He didn't just know, he was obsessed. "What do you know?" she asked. "Detailed but concise, please." Like reporting to a superior officer, the information spilled from Lundgren. He felt almost eager. The IMH is generally considered to be a multi-generational serial killing syndicate that has been in operation for over 300 years. It was founded by a Vehestian smuggler from the sweep system named Kovai Nistrol, who hasn't been publicly cited in over 370 years. The MO and appearance of the killer has never changed in all that time, and we know that Nistrol was a questionable character. We suspect cloning. Considering the average Vehestian lives about 175 years, we think the torch has probably been passed 3 or 4 times. Lundgren paused and considered whether he should be feeling a little more frightened. There was certainly some anxiety, but it felt distant. He couldn't help but admit that she really had designed quite an effective little paralytic. The irony that his face remained unaffected, whilst the rest of him, both physically and emotionally, felt numb to all around him, hadn't escaped his notice. "Please continue," she instructed. Lundgren didn't know when he had surrendered the intimacy of eye contact. He simply found staring at a ceiling of lights more comfortable. She was on his right, calmly adjusting the bed, holding him prone to a 45-degree angle. Clearing his throat, he continued. "Thus far, we've confirmed 715 kills over 67 separate planetary systems right across the Milky Way galaxy. It is the only criminal case that has ever experienced galactic collaboration from all 89 systems recognized law enforcement agencies. The most astonishing fact is, other than the footage, we have literally no other clues or evidence to build a case with. "Is that all?" she asked quietly. He looked at her through the corners of his eyes. She was over by the water cylinder, attaching a long hose and shower nozzle to a valve on the side. "Well, there's a theory that all serial killers want to be caught, but the IMH has proven to be the exception. As I said, 0 sightings. There's never been a more successful criminal syndicate. And their motive? Vengeance. Is there anything pettier? There are several things actually, but continue." He chanced another look. She was adjusting something out of sight on top of the cylinder. The hose hung down the back of her left shoulder. "They find people they consider victims whom have been denied justice via official means and take revenge on their behalf, completely. No one is left to continue the cycle of vengeance." He expelled a sigh that sounded almost like a sob. "This will be cold," she said, and turned on the hose without giving him a moment to protest. The water was indeed cold, and he gasped audibly. The pressure was decent for a cylinder setup. Of course, he could only feel that as she blasted him right in the face. Looking down, he could see a clotted, foamy spiral at the bottom as water and vomit drained away to who knows where. She made sure to get as much off of him as possible, even scrubbing his face with a rough cloth. The cold shock was the final catalyst in restoring his clarity. As she shut the valve on the cylinder, the room suddenly became very familiar. He'd just never imagined it from a victim's point of view before. The water cylinder, 5 feet tall, should have been the first clue, but the wide, rigged medical bed, the stark white walls and various fixtures, this was the IMH's killing room. "Fuck," he said it with soft resignation, closing his eyes. "Alexei?" he asked, forcing himself to look at her. She simply smiled. "I suppose it's time things got interesting." She tilted her head, not breaking eye contact, and changed into a 9-foot artisan right in front of his eyes. Sporting a full complement of tusks, 4 arms, and thick, motley brown, leathery skin. With 2 enormous hands, she grabbed him by the chest, and with another, she deftly undid the restraints that held his wrists. He couldn't feel them. He simply observed their lifeless flap in his periphery. Careful not to disturb the IV and needle, she gently rested him forward, cradling him in 2 of her 4 hands. Hanging as though over a horse's rump, with his face facing towards the metal floor, he noticed rivets. With a free hand, she flipped the valve back on, and he felt the cold water blasting the back of his head. She made sure to get every last scrap of mucus, alcohol, and tiny chunks of stomach lining from his hair. He heard the telltale pattering of water blasting plastic as she cleaned the bed. Once done, she pinned him back against it and quickly lowered him into a horizontal position. She morphed back into her previous form. She wasn't young, but he couldn't fathom any sort of age in her either. She was certainly beautiful. She proceeded to gently tie his wrists back up above his head. It took the lock clunking loudly into place that brought him back to his senses, just enough to ask, "What are you?" "I am glad you asked." She wasn't looking at him, preoccupied with returning the cylinder and hose to their original places. "I am a changeling." "Impossible," he scoffed. "Possible," she challenged. "What did you just see?" As she spoke, she had moved over to the sonic hygiene basin and was fervently cleaning her arms and hands. The changelings from the Alpha Centauri system were all exterminated nearly 400 years ago. It was the only mass-sanctioned genocide with a full vote from 89 out of 90 planetary systems. A vote held without our system, within which we lived peacefully among 3 other sentient spacefaring species. Most of them died with us, did you know? Only the fractions off-planet were spared. They are still trying to rebuild. Except for the changelings, who were all confirmed as being on-planet within the Alpha Centauri system at the time. How did you survive? I had been abducted by Vehestian smuggler from the sweep system prior to your destruction of our system. I must have been given up for dead when I didn't return during the summons. She closed her eyes briefly with a pause, then continued. I certainly felt the yearning to return. It was incredibly painful. To be called home on such an instinctive level, to then be unable to return due to my unlawful confinement. She took another pause, but made firm eye contact, compelling him to remain silent. It nearly killed me, and it should have. With the destruction of my home world, the cosmic link compelling us to return each Centauri century was severed. As such, I survived. Is that why you kill? It's just personal vengeance all along? He felt comfort in the scorn he was able to insert in his tone. She laughed softly. No, it's not even why I started killing. That honor rests with the smuggler who repeatedly raped me every night for 12 years, which was how long it took me to build immunity to his variety of custom sedatives, by the way. He was guilty of other crimes, but I digress. I slowly tortured him to death, probably 9 years after being severed from the link. Why do you kill then? He asked as she removed the Medi-strap and IV with ease, stowing it out of sight. The effects of the paralytic will wear off quickly. She continued without a pause. I kill because 5 years after I escaped my confinement, I found someone else denied justice, someone too pure and injured to take vengeance for themselves. I cared for him very much. That was over 367 years ago. The Vehestian smuggler, you use his face for all your killings, don't you? The fear welling in his chest felt like an ocean tide. There's no syndicate either. It's just been you all along? I do, and yes. She permitted a small pause to let that sink in then. I think it's time we got on with it. She walked over to the back wall and pressed gently against it. A small, previously imperceptible cabinet opened up. Inside was a camera link-up, a large red sledgehammer, and an assortment of torturing tools. She morphed into the Vehestian smuggler, now standing 6 feet tall. She pressed a small button on the side of the camera to start recording, sending the footage out to the whole system. Live. Do you understand why you are here? The smuggler's voice was deep, smooth, and seductive. He knew, and he saw now further point in wasting time. He was resigning himself to his fate. He knew his options, and opted for complete honesty. I shouldn't have won my case today. Correct, she affirmed. And do you recognize this? She held up a small rectangular drive, fitted with an illegal isolation port so the data contained cannot be detected, even when plugged into one of Earth's collection servers, which was basically all of them. Lundgren recognized it on an almost intimate level. Seeing it in her hands was like a violation. It's my diary, he replied, looking straight ahead of him. I suppose you want the encryption key? No, I'm good. I just wanted you and every single one of your accomplices to know I had this. You've all been very busy, with quite a variety of things. The paralytic had worn off completely, and Lundgren was very much aware of his body. The pain, discomfort, fear, and anxiety enveloped him like a landslide. He couldn't stop the tears singing his eyes, nor the sobbing noises of hyperventilation as panic consumed him. With a mighty crack, Fire exploded across his left cheek. She had hit him hard. First Trooper Lundgren Morrissey, Constabulary Grid 7H6 of Earth's Solar Militia. You have two choices. She never once looked at the camera. Her focus was on him and the task ahead. She continued, "You can confess, and I'll make it quick, or you can deny your crimes and face torture." First Trooper Morrissey, what do you choose? My case, he stuttered. Rutger V. Morrissey. I am guilty of the crime he accused me of. He confesses. He could hear the smile in her voice. What crime was that? What was it that 14-year-old Alexei Rutgar accused you of? I responded to a report of domestic abuse and neglect from a concerned neighbor. When I arrived on scene, Alexei had already been alone for 3 days, with neither food and nor money. His father was dead, and his mother appeared to have run off with another lover. He swallowed, not wanting to continue. You know how this works. Speak, or I will make you. I raped him, okay? He blurted out, and then we covered it up, like we always do. Correct, she said. Lundgren knew what was coming and started hyperventilating again. He didn't have to look. Lundgren Morrissey, by your own account, she said, holding the drive aloft. You have raped or somehow sexually assaulted over 37 people, 28 of them minors, the youngest of which was only 6. You will be the first of many, and you will watch it coming. Lundgren knew not to close his eyes for fear of having his eyelids torn off. The very last thing he saw before it all went dark was the rapidly descending head of an enormous red sledgehammer as it slammed into his face. To live a life posthumously. The casket was oak with a mahogany finish. A yellow cut sunflower lay haphazardly between the fingers of the body, the most color offered in the small run-down church. Only 3 people entered the room. Only 3 took seats in the front aisle, chipped gas cans and matchboxes in hand. The uniformity of the black outfits made the room feel smaller, duller. The only respite was the small, almost seamless lines of dark gray thread interwoven into the fabric of each person's blazer. An imperfection, yes, but a consolation for him nonetheless. Each blazer told a different story: missed meals and burning anger, a car, a sunflower field, and unfortunate truths, old fortunes and new beginnings. That was what they were. Memories of a time when he lived, stories into the person he was. So as he watched the 3 effortlessly coat the aisle seats and checkered floors with oil, watched as the papers of his existence become pliant under the weight of the foreign substance, he thought back to a time when he simply was. The calm before the storm. It is bright and damp. A cold draft whistles through the broken roof of the rundown house. The only warmth apparent was from the overused patchwork blanket and the 2 sizes to big black blazer, the price tag still attached. Silas felt along the side of the stiff material, wincing at the tear already present from the rusted sharp metal of old Mac's wired fence. Damn it, my first big job, and I already made a mess. His father would not be happy. He got up and slipped down the stairs from the rickety attic, stopping shortly as he heard the hushed voices in the kitchen. He readied himself to flee before carefully peeking through the gap in the door. You said you would stop. You promised me you wouldn't steal or sell again, that when the kids were born, we would start fresh. Mama clenched the ladle in her hand, the remaining soup on it, slowly dripping onto the floor. Silas's stomach clenched at the wasted food. Mama never wasted food. Father seemed to realize this too, as his large shoulders seemed to shrink under his wife's eyes. The gun he was cleaning in his hands, less a threat compared to her ever-growing anger. We did. I have. But this time it was personal. He attacked this family's integrity. He questioned our worth. I had the money we could have paid, but he wouldn't let us. So we left, taking only what we rightly deserved. He attacked the gun with a new sense of purpose, the black residue coming off further, staining his stubby fingers, leaving the faint scars still visible on them to almost glow against his sunburnt skin. They both became still, the anger permeating the room colder, clearer. It felt like a line had been drawn, with one person on each side. It felt permanent. Then know this, Antonio. We have followed you around as you have shepherded us like sheep to the slaughter, purposefully ignorant. I wonder when we are dead and gone, if you will still try to talk of integrity. Silas's stomach clenched and rumbled. He wished he was somewhere else. What once was still is. It was windy and hot, the moon the only source of light. The leather shift grated against his hand as the car flew around the corner. Fuck, 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 the police were gaining. Damn it, Silas, push it! Creed's voice echoed around the car, his brother's patience waning. It felt like he was stuck underwater. Everything seemed to merge into one. His black blazer stuck to his skin as perspiration slowly fell down his neck. His fingers shook, and his pulse raced. Breathing felt hard. It was too hot. It was too sticky. It was too dark. Everything was just too much. Houses passed in a blur as they raced away from the inevitable. The sound of the siren receded and returned like waves upon the shore. They were coming to the end of the street. Beside them, hidden behind the buildings, was a field of sunflowers. Their brightness diminished due to the enveloping darkness. Ahead was a dusted-out dirt road where they would most certainly be arrested. Creed's tattooed fingers came into his line of view, his pointer extended to the side of Silas. Turn here, down this side street. Once you get to the end, drive straight into those flowers and cut the engine. The car lurched to the left, the wheels leaving the ground from the sudden turn, before gravity took over, and Silas rammed the vehicle into the complying field and buried the flowers under the tracks of his tires. Silas turned sharply once more before turning off the ignition. A loud silence consumed the car as everything settled, the void only filled by the slight tapping sound of their boots and stuttering breaths. The siren passed, taking with it Silas's anxiety, but not his anger. He waited a few before speaking. I thought this was meant to be a small job. No cops, no competition, just a simple drop-off. He watched Creed pull at the tie around his throat, his ample fingers moving quickly and with purpose. It was. Dad knew that Anthony would pull one on him, so he asked me to switch the cargo before handing it over. Anything the cops find will come back to him, not us. Silas scoffed. So he told you but didn't bother to tell me. We could have been caught, or worse, we could have died. I have an econ paper due, and instead of doing that, I am wasting away in a car with someone who would rather have no future. The veins on Creed's head throbbed as his anger increased. No future? This family is your future. How many times do I have to tell you that? Ondiam vai. Ozotra's sagging. The sound of Creed's phone ringing stopped Silas from responding as he listened with bated breath to the sharply spoken conversation. The awkward silence rose as Creed finished his phone call, both boys now leaning on their slightly open doors, the cool breeze doing nothing to calm the blistering rage from their prior conversation. Dad said he will be here in 30. We've been asked to wait. Creed pocketed his phone, a scowl resting on his face. Silas looked at the sunflowers beside him, watching them sway and jitter like puppets on a string. Control or be controlled, as his father always said. It was a pity he wasn't the latter. He curled his fingers in feeling at the moon-shaped scars on his palm, forcing down the words he wished he could say, and closed his eyes. Yeah, I guess we wait. The end. The room was ablaze in orange and yellow, the snap of the fire against the brawny wood aisle seats and fabric curtains like the crescendo in a song, dramatic and loud. In all the abruptness and carnage, Silas felt at peace. Looking down at his body, hair slicked back, black blazer on, Silas felt he could finally move on. The slow opening of the doors drew his attention back as he watched the backs of his family exit the burning church. A small hand rested itself on his shoulder. Its voice was soft and almost overtaken by the symphony of sounds made by the flames. It is time. Silas took one final look at himself before turning and walking into the shadows. Found you. Grandma is dying, but she has lived a long and good life. At the age of 97, she was in remarkably good shape until a cancer diagnosis 3 months ago. She made it clear from the start that she didn't want to fight it. No chemo, no radiation, no surgeries. Just keep me comfortable and let me die in my own home, was all she asked. My sister, Lori, and I were supposed to be taking turns staying with her in her house, but Lori works a lot. I am basically staying here full time. Fortunately, my job is a remote research position. Grandma was skeptical when I told her that I could work from home, or from her house, or wherever I happened to be. For her, a job is a place to go every day, not something you can do just by opening up your laptop. I set up a makeshift office at her dining room table. After working in silence for a few hours, I decide to check on Grandma. Sure enough, she is asleep in her room. I have noticed that she is sleeping more and has more episodes of confusion. Hospice comes by once a day to check her vitals, see if she needs more meds, and let us know how she is doing. I begin to think about my grandma's life, the life that is about to end. I need to think about that, about the obituary anyway. I begin making some notes. Born Annie Lee Morton in 1928 to Deborah and Leroy Morton, she grew up in Smith County. At the age of 16, she got a job at the snack counter of the old Songbird drugstore. It was there she met John Joseph Lane, or JoJo as everyone called him. They married in 1950 and welcomed a son in 1955. Mrs. Lane went on to move to Livingston. She began a job with the Renault Insurance Agency as a secretary in 1964, where she worked until her retirement in 2002. In her retirement, Mrs. Lane remained active with the local theater, as a library volunteer, and with local charities. Many in the community remember her warmly. She was preceded in death by her son, Jacob Lane, several years ago. She is survived by his daughters, Lori and Maddie Lane. I stare at the notes in front of me. I can't believe that is all there is. After 97 years, there should be more. I look out the window. The backyard is filled with dry brown leaves. My grandmother always kept everything so tidy, and the yard was no exception. Until the cancer, she raked those leaves herself. If she looks out her bedroom window, she will see how neglected the yard is, I think. I retrieve the rake from the backyard shed, and I think about the short obituary. The truth is that Grandma's life had one big black hole. It was the void left by her husband and my grandfather, John Joseph Lane, or JoJo as everyone called him. My dad died in a car accident when I was 9. I then developed a burning curiosity to find out everything about his life and his family. My mother had packed away most of my father's things. I looked through them and found them lacking in giving me any clue about who he really was. So, When I spent time with my grandma, I looked to her for information. I rummaged through my father's old room, and that was where I first found pictures of my dad's father, Jojo. Grandma always spoke highly of Jojo. He was a good father, a good husband. They were in love and happy. My dad, as a boy, had adored Jojo. What happened to him? I remembered asking Grandma. Did he die? She was in her 70s then, but had the face of a younger woman. Her smile faded away, and her eyes became serious. He left one day, she said. But where did he go? I pressed on. At the age of 9, I didn't understand the concept of separation, abandonment, or heartbreak. I don't know, honey. You see, he had lost his job, and we were struggling, she explained. Sometimes, I think he just, maybe went off somewhere and decided to disappear. I remember being shocked and horrified at the prospect. As a child, I didn't know that people could just vanish, except for kids who were stolen. But adults? Never were they supposed to disappear. After that, I never asked any more pointed questions about Jojo, but sometimes Grandma would make a remark that would give me a snippet of information. His favorite meal was meatloaf with mashed potatoes, peas, and yeast rolls. He was a good dancer. When my grandma was pregnant, Jojo knew it was going to be a boy. He was so excited to have a son. Then he left when my dad was 8 years old. It made no sense. I had asked my mom about the whole situation later on. She just shrugged. According to my dad, he fell asleep one night, and the next morning Jojo was gone. I think of this as I rake the leaves into piles. I start at the perimeter of the yard, and I am working my way to the center. I am out of shape, and am starting to sweat in spite of the cool temperature. One last drag of the rake across the ground, and I am going to go in and rest. I cannot believe my 97-year-old grandmother raked these leaves. My thoughts are interrupted when I realize that the rake is stuck on something. I can't seem to pull it toward me, so I lift it up, and that is when I see that the rake is tangled with a leather strap. Bending down, pushing the leaves and grass away, I realize that the strap is connected to something that is buried. I pull harder on the strap, and I feel something give way, but it is deep. Retrieving a small garden trowel from the shed, I dig until I can make out the top of a leather bag. After a few minutes of pulling and digging, I get the item out. It is an old leather purse, stiff, scratched and caked with mud. The clasp on top is an old clasp, the kind with 2 metal pieces that wrap around each other and make a snap sound when they are forced closed. It is rusty, but after some effort, I manage to pry the purse open. Looking down into the black plastic lining, I see that the purse is empty, except for a bundle wrapped in wax paper. The paper is brittle when I unfold it. Inside, I find a large brown stained envelope, and within it another smaller envelope. I open it to find even more wax paper, and finally a thick bundle of folded notebook paper tied with string. I untie the string and open the paper. It seems to be a letter of some kind. The first page has only one sentence. "Dear Jojo, I am so sorry," is written in my grandma's precise cursive script. At that moment, I hear a car pull into the driveway in front of the house. The hospice aide is here. I feel panicked. I go into the house, stopping in the kitchen. For some reason, I feel as if no one should see me with these papers. I tuck everything underneath the kitchen sink before I open the front door to greet the hospice aide. Grandma wakes when we enter her bedroom. She is confused when she sees the aide put the blood pressure cuff around her upper arm. "What are you doing?" she snaps at the aide. The aide's name tag says Lavana. She smiles at my grandma. "I'm just checking on you, Miss Lane, just kicking the tires and looking under the hood." My grandma laughs. "I think my transmission is going," she says. We all laugh. "Maybe so, but your motor is still running, Grandma," I tell her. After Lavana has left, I put on the kettle and take some warm chamomile tea up to the bedroom, but Grandma has already gone back to sleep. It won't be long now, I think. I pull the papers out from under the sink. I look at that first page again. "Dear Jojo, I am so sorry." I flip to the page to read on. My grandmother's handwriting was unmistakable. Date: Monday, November 25th, 1963. Jojo, you are gone. I know where you are, and I cannot tell anyone, and I cannot keep it in. So I will tell the pages. Only the pages will know. I will write this. I will bury it deep, deep in the ground, deep in me. Jojo lost his job 3 months ago. He was working for Wilhelm's Furniture. He had been there for years. But then the owner died and the place shut down, laid everyone off. At first, we weren't worried. But then, when Jojo started trying to find work, he couldn't. No one was hiring. Not the factories, not the stores. Then, we got behind on rent. The landlord said he would work with us, but then the gas bill went unpaid and got turned off. It was getting colder. I dressed in layers. I dressed our boy in layers. I scraped together meals of salt and pepper and butter and rice. Finally, we got into a fight. I told Jojo. He was no kind of man, no kind of father, that couldn't even feed his child, couldn't even keep him warm. Jojo, I will never forget your face when you left that night. I looked up for a moment. So there had been an argument, but that hardly explained the fact that Jojo was never seen or heard from again. I flipped to the 3rd page, hoping to find answers. Grandma had written this page later. Date: Wednesday, November 26th, 1963. Jojo, you came back. You left, but you came back, and you had money. A big wad of cash. It looked funny. It was smeared with something, and then I realized that it was blood, and you were bleeding from your side, but you said it was nothing. You told me to hide the money, use a bit of it to buy food and pay the gas bill and rent, but hide the rest. Then you said you had to leave. Jojo, you said you were going to go to our cave, the one we used to go to when we were courting. You would be back in a few days. If anyone asked, I was to say that you were out of town, looking for work, and that you would be back, but you never came back. Within the handwritten pages was a newspaper clipping. It was about a robbery of a tavern 2 counties away. I read the clipping carefully, suspecting what it had to do with Jojo. The headline was big and bold in all capital letters. Robbery gone wrong. 1 dead, money missing. Officials are still trying to piece together what happened at Big Al's Tavern on the night of November 23rd, 1963. The tavern was reportedly not very busy, and the last customer who left at midnight reported seeing the owner, Al Harvey, cleaning the counter as he usually did at closing time. The next morning, Big Al would be dead on the floor of the tavern, and a trail of blood led out the door. Unfortunately, it was impossible to track further because of heavy rain during the night and early morning hours. Eyewitness accounts state that a man in a red-checked shirt was seen running into the woods behind the tavern. So Jojo, desperate to provide for his family, had committed a robbery. It was almost heroic, but I couldn't push away the grim thought that he had somehow killed a man in the process. Looking down into the bundle of paper, I see another newspaper clipping. Big Al put up a fight. Sheriff Ernest Glenn stated in an interview that officers have been able to figure out what probably happened during the robbery at Big Al's Tavern on the fateful night of November 23rd, just one day after the assassination of our president. While the nation was in mourning, someone entered Big Al's just after closing to rob the tavern. Big Al was no pushover, however, and had other plans for the perpetrator. From the amount of blood spilled, it looked as if the unknown assailant was stabbed deeply, at least once. Unfortunately, Big Al was injured during the struggle and died of a head injury sustained when fell and hit the wooden bar top on the way down. Sheriff Glenn made this statement: "Wherever the assailant is, he will be looking for a hospital. He is going to have to get patched up somewhere. We will find him. It doesn't matter if Al died from the fall. We will be looking at murder charges." The next page was dated Friday, December 6th, 1963. It was written in Grandma's handwriting. "Dear Jojo, I went to the cave. I know you told me to wait, but I went to the cave where we used to go, where we spent so many hours talking with each other, loving each other. I found you there, my darling. At first I was relieved to see you, sitting against the wall. Then I saw the blood that had poured out of you, your eyes unseeing, your skin marble cold, and there you were in front of me, and gone at the same time. I will tell no one. I love you, and I will tell no one what you did or where you are. Goodbye, my love." After that, she had written one more thing: $5,576. I guess that must have been how much Jojo had gotten from the robbery. I was stunned. It was all here, the solution to our family mystery. Jojo had committed a robbery to keep his family fed and warm. A fight between him and owner of the business ensued. Jojo was seriously injured. The other man was killed in the struggle. Jojo managed to make it home, give Grandma the money, and take refuge in a cave, where he died of his injuries. Upstairs, I hear my grandma stirring. I hide the papers underneath the couch cushion and run upstairs. She is out of bed and so confused. I need to get to work, she tells me. Where? I ask. She is impatient with me. The drugstore, silly. Who are you anyway? I'm your granddaughter, Maddie, I answer. She laughs. I don't have a granddaughter. I'm only 18. I realize that her mind is somewhere back in time, before the tragedy of Jojo. Do you have a boyfriend? I ask slyly. Grandma smiles again. His name is Jojo. He is so handsome. He takes me courting in the cave behind the old Myers farm sometimes. We can be alone there. Then the smile fades. Where am I? She asks. I tell her she is home and I help her back to the bed. That is the last time she speaks. Grandma dies the next night. I hide the letters at my own apartment and never tell anyone about them. It took me a few days looking through old property records to figure out where the old Myers farm had been. A mall sits there now, but it is long since closed and abandoned. The woods behind it are still intact. I waited for the weather to warm up and decided to hike out there. I found the cave. There was graffiti and a bit of trash near the entrance. Inside, it was dark and cool. It went deep into the side of the mountain. I had brought a long spool of fishing line, attached it to a tree outside, and unwound it as I walked deeper into the dark abyss. I didn't know how big it was, and I didn't want to lose my way. I moved my flashlight through the dark, and when I saw nothing, I kept walking. Then I noticed a shaft of sunlight coming through a crack in the rocks. I walked toward this light and found myself in a separate chamber. At first I thought it was empty too. Then I spotted the still human figure sitting propped against a large boulder. The bones of Jojo Lane still sit. He still wears the black cowboy boots, the blue jeans, and red-checked button-up shirt he put on one morning in November of 1963. The skull grins and a skeletal hand is reaching out toward me. I kneel and look at the empty eye sockets. "Found you," I say. Jojo doesn't reply. I sit with my grandfather for a while. The cave is still. The sunlight begins to fade. I reach over to hold the skeletal hand. I think long and hard what to do. Should I alert the police? Should I make an anonymous report? Should I tell my sister and my mom? Then I realize I don't have to decide today. He has been here for decades. A few more years won't hurt. I will leave him alone for now. As I rise from the floor of the cave, I can almost feel him looking at me. I turn around, half expecting him to animate, to tell me not to go yet. The skeleton still sits, expecting nothing, asking nothing. I tell Jojo goodbye and turn to follow my fishing line through the dark cave and back into the present, leaving Jojo to sit where the past had left him. "It's murder, sir." A scream, the sharp clatter of a dropped tea service, the sound of soft sobs, a rush of footsteps up the stairs, the sight of a dead body, and then silence. "It's murder, sir," PC Connors spoke. DCI Whitcomb eyed the constable wearily, sighing inwardly. He was tired already, and they had just arrived at the scene of a particularly bloody crime. "For future reference, if we ever come across the body of an old lady sitting at her writing desk with a knife through her neck, let's take it as read that it's murder, Connors." DC Whitcomb sat in a chair and surveyed the room. "Where is WPC Sanders? I need her eyes up here." Whitcomb muttered the last sentence under his breath. He was a man who appreciated a woman on the police force, for she would often have a point of view that he would never see. She was certainly good at her job. She took excellent photographs, a new thing in police work. She also did a fine job with fingerprints, although Whitcomb had reservations about their usefulness. WPC Sanders struggled through the door, laden with equipment. No one offered to assist her. She had learned not to ask. With brisk movements, she set up the equipment and started taking photographs. Whitcomb didn't need to be there for this, but he stayed anyway. Connors stood by the door, shifting from foot to foot. DC. Whitcomb sighed again, this time audibly. "Connors, make yourself useful for once and gather the family downstairs, and make sure that blasted butler is there too." Whitcomb didn't like the fish-eyed butler at all. He looked suspicious. Why he looked suspicious was anyone's guess, but Whitcomb had taken an instant dislike to the man. Whitcomb poked around the old lady's room for a few minutes, taking mental notes and nodding his head a few times. Sanders carried on silently. She knew better than to interject her thoughts, but she also knew that she would be asked about her views on the case in due time. Satisfied, Whitcomb left the room, instructing Sanders to get a wriggle on and then meet him downstairs. Whitcomb tested the hallways and the stairs on his way down. Solid, every square inch. Anyone could creep about up here and not be heard, he mused. The old lady had 2 sons and 1 daughter, all of whom lived with their now deceased mother in the mansion. The 3 progeny were all sitting, and they seemed nervous to Whitcomb. Naturally, he thought. One of them is a killer. I need to interview all of you separately. Once I have finished, I will send you back in here. There is to be no conversing between yourselves until I have finished. PC Connors will be here to make sure that you abide by my directive." "I say," One of the men stood up, a small frown on his face, and a rather large whiskey in his hand. "The law," Whitcomb said severely, "requires this, sir." The man sat down and said nothing more, but his face showed his displeasure. The woman scoffed, either at her brother's reaction or the DCI's statements. One just couldn't be sure. DCI Whitcomb pointed at the man who had stood up, gesturing for him to approach with the crook of his forefinger. "You first, sir." The questioning went along normal, well-worn lines. Whitcomb saw no need to alter what had always worked. You found out where everyone was during the crime, you looked for corroboration, and you noted any strange behavior. The stories were distressingly similar. Not to put too fine a point on it, the stories were exact. Everyone was downstairs, eating breakfast, when the maid discovered the body. No one had seen their mother since 10 o'clock the night before. All retired to bed at roughly the same time, a little after midnight. The butler and the head housekeeper, a married couple who had worked for the murdered woman for over 30 years, retired to their rooms a little before midnight. All the door and windows had been shut and locked. DCI Whitcomb leaned back and sighed. He had had to deal with 2 murders in his 30-year career before this one, and they had been straightforward. The guilty parties had been easily nabbed, the evidence had been plentiful, and the convictions had been a foregone conclusion. He thought of the men who had been hanged because of his efforts. He could still see them swinging slightly from their final earthly judgment at the end of a rope. With a slight shudder, he returned to his task. "It's a nasty business, sir," PC Connors spoke up. Once again he was standing in a doorway, shifting from foot to foot nervously. Whitcomb looked at him with some slight irritation. The man had a positive talent for stating the obvious. "Why don't you go get yourself a cuppa? See if the staff have anything to say about it all. Take your time, Connors. Maybe have a biscuit or two," Whitcomb said. The sarcasm in his voice was completely lost on Connors. Connors lost no time in doing so. The detective chief inspector made him nervous at the best of times, but on this case, he seemed positively put out. Besides, he was feeling a bit peckish and could do with a nice cup of tea and a bite to eat. "Well, he's good to have around when we need some muscle," WPC Sanders commented graciously. "Ha! And that's all he's good for." "Still, he's a good lad," Whitcomb said. Whitcomb winced at the thought of Connors becoming a detective chief inspector in the future. The man had no business running an investigation. WPC Sanders would be a far better candidate. But she was a woman, and she would not get the chance to advance beyond her current status. Whitcomb and Sanders went through the bedrooms of the siblings, and that of the butler and his wife as well, but success was limited. It would have been nice to find some bloody clothes tucked away somewhere. But this murderer wasn't as obliging as the other killers he had faced in his career. The evening was fast approaching on this October night. Soon the sun would disappear, and the night would be cold. It might even snow, Whitcomb thought. While he didn't relish the thought of being stranded here, he also didn't want to leave and allow a killer to escape. Whitcomb had the butler make up a bedroom for him. The man blinked rapidly behind his glasses and hesitated slightly before nodding and doing as he was told. Suspicious, Whitcomb thought again. Whitcomb sent the other 2 home, instructing Sanders to develop the photographs and bring them back early in the morning. Connors was to fill the car's tank with petrol and make sure the vehicle was equipped to deal with a tire puncture. Connor may not be a great copper, but he was good with cars. As he settled in for the night, Whitcomb thought of the suspects. They all had motive, and he knew that one of them had to be the murderer. The butler and his wife knew more than they were letting on. but they were guilty of no bigger a crime than loyalty to the family. The kitchen staff and maids were tight-lipped as well, but Whitcomb was sure that they knew nothing of the murder of old Mrs. Ainsley. Even the gardeners and the handymen had precious little to say about it all, probably because they had nothing of import to tell. Whitcomb sighed and turned out the light. Whitcomb was up early the next morning, well before the 3 Ainsley siblings. He wandered into the kitchen to see about getting a cup of tea. He found Connors there, chatting amiably with the cook and the maids. They all quickly scraped back their chairs and stood up when Whitcomb entered. Whitcomb waved his hand, gesturing for them to all sit down. He gave Connors an appreciative nod of the head. The man was not lazy, he thought. "WPC Sanders is in the library, sir. She has those photographs," Connors said. Whitcomb patted him on the shoulder and told him to carry on, by which he meant that Connors should continue to have a chat and a cuppa, staying out of Whitcomb's way. WPC Sanders did not stand when Whitcomb entered the library. She was studying the panoply of photographs that she had laid out across the ventral table in an impressively large library. Whitcomb was slightly stunned at the sheer size of the room and the thousands of books it contained. Rich folk, he mused, lived much differently than he did. "Good morning, Dad," Sanders said as she continued to scan the photographs. "I am DCI Whitcomb when we're working, young lady. I am your loving and generous dad when we are off duty. You would do well to remember that," Whitcomb said with some asperity. He loved his daughter, but he didn't like that she had to see such a gruesome sight yesterday. It made him testy. He didn't like having to tell his wife that their daughter had seen a dead body. It made him testy. He didn't like that his daughter had to go home and tell her husband that she had seen more blood than anyone should have to see. It made him testy. "Sorry, Dad. DCI Whitcomb, sir." Sanders looked up and grinned at her father and her superior at work. She was not above a little needling. "Enough with the pleasantries. What do you see in these pictures?" Sanders stood up and directed Whitcomb to a set of photographs near her. "You can see that the old lady was killed at the desk. No blood trail, just splatters and spray. Except in this one area, very little blood." "So," Whitcomb said. "So, the killer cut through the jugular and the blood spurted on him," Sanders said. "Or her." "I don't think it was a woman," Sanders said. "It takes some strength to get the knife completely through the neck." Whitcomb looked through the photographs and nodded. "Let's sit down, have some tea, and go through the evidence," Whitcomb said. "Righto, DCI Whitcomb, and maybe a biscuit. I'm famished," Sanders said. DC Connors was instructed not to interrupt the other 2 officers while they were locked away in the library. He was to continue the all-important work of chatting with the help. Connors nodded seriously and did as he was told. He was especially interested in chatting with the maid who had found old Mrs. Ainsley. She was young, pretty, and available. "Your thoughts," Whitcomb started. "William Ainsley, the eldest. He and his brother Rupert have a consulting business. Legal experts, they call themselves. They have a scrubby little office off of the high street, and they consult 2 times a week. They bring in less money than you pay me," Sanders said, grinning at her dad. "The Queen pays you," he said. "Right. South. They basically live off of their trust fund while living here for free." "The daughter?" "Estella. She was married for 20 years. Husband died in a motor accident 3 years ago. She also has a trust fund. She also lives here for free." "I have a feeling that the mother didn't want them here," Whitcomb said. "Probably true. Look at these photographs. The mother didn't have a picture of any of her kids. but she has several of her late husband. The kids all have a picture of their mother. It's the exact same picture. Someone had copies made of a photograph, stuck them in nice silver frames, and hey presto, job done. One of them is a murderer. True. I plump for one of the boys, Dad. They have the muscle to carry it off. I'm not your dad right now. Also, whoever the killer is has bloody clothes to dispose of and a guilty conscience to assuage. Sanders nodded, then looked at her dad. She knew what was coming. Did you ask them? Whitcomb nodded. And? William claims that Rupert had to have done it. Rupert swears that Estella has a murderous streak in her and that she did it. Estella knows in her heart that William is the type to kill the old lady. Convenient, Sanders said. Quite. So, we need to find some bloody clothes. Maybe try to get one of the staff to tell us more than they have so far, Sanders said. A voice spoke from the entrance to the library. I don't reckon you'll find any bloody clothes, or the killer. Sanders and Whitcomb looked up, surprised. Surprise turned to amazement. D.C. Connors strode into the library and sat down, looking at his comrades. Explain yourself, Connors, Whitcomb said severely. He didn't like that Connor had come into the library unawares, and he especially didn't like what Connors said. Connors plopped a book on the table, leaned forward, and spoke. I was questioning that maid what saw the body. Jenny, you see? Strolling through the garden. I saw you two lovebirds. Sanders poked at Connors. Like I says, Connors continued, unperturbed. I was asking her about this and that. Lovely girl. We're going to the cinema Sunday afternoon. That's her afternoon off. Connors. Be a good lad and act like a copper, Whitcomb said sternly. Right. So we get to talking about books. She has this cracking good book here, and she hands it to me. It's a murder mystery set on a train. The Oriental Express. The Orient Express, Sanders said, reading the title. That one, yeah. Anyway, what happened was, there's a murder on the train. Turns out all the people on the train had a hand in killing this bloke what killed a baby. This dandified detective figures it out. Frenchman, I think. Belgian, Whitcomb muttered. So there's the story. The book belongs to the family. Jenny tells me that all the kids read it. The butler, too. Okay. So we continue to walk. I find a burn pile near the gardener's cottages. I dig through it and find burnt clothes. I tell her I got to get back and tell you. So we start back. Well, soon as we leave, I spot a gardener stoking up that fire again. I rush back, but it's too late. Everything is ashes by now. Uh-huh. Continue, Whitcomb said softly. He had a sinking feeling in the pit of his stomach. Well, sir, then there's the lawyer chap. The what? The lawyer chappie for the old lady. The old lady called him on the blower and told him to step on down here on Wednesday. She wanted to stanchially alternate her will. Alter. Yes, sir, that one. The kids all were there in the living room and they all heard the call to the lawyer chap. So did the butler. And then the kids all go to the library and shut the door. They're in there for a couple of hours. Which is strange, Jenny says, 'cause they don't really like each other all that much. South, that's that. Whitcomb and Sanders nodded, deep dejection on their faces. They were all in on it, including the help. Yes, sir. Jenny tells me the old lady was miserly and didn't pay them much at all, but the kids always gave them money to help them out. Jenny in on it too? Sanders asked. I reckon so, but I still like her. We're stepping out and don't try to stop me, Connors said determinedly. She's guilty of murder, Whitcomb said. I don't reckon she stuck the old lady. Connors said. She knows who did it, boy. I reckon I'm fine with that. I have to let you go then. I can't have a man on the force who knows wrongdoing and lets it go. Connors nodded. I'll work for my dad. Good money to be had in fixing automobiles. It all fit. Everyone colluded to kill the old lady. Everyone was guilty. Nothing, though, could be proven. The murderers were known, yet escaped the justice of the law. They did not escape karmic justice, however. Within a year, all of the siblings were dead. Both boys died from eating tainted fish paste. The woman fell down the stairs at the mansion and died of a broken neck. All of the deaths were suspicious, but nothing could be proven. Curiously, Jenny produced evidence in the form of letters from her father and her mother, a former scullery maid at the Ainsley residence, that showed she was the illegitimate daughter of the late Mr. Ainsley. These letters were produced a few days after the death of the last sibling. She inherited everything. Jenny and ex-PC Connors were married soon thereafter. DCY Whitcomb and WPC Sanders did not attend the wedding, of course. They did not care to consort with murderers. Tokyo Smoke. Possible triggers: intimidation, slight, mention of drugs, and trial. She flicked the wheel of the lighter. Sparks shot up, followed by a small flame which she held to the end of the cigarette dangling from between her lips. Talk. You've got about 5 minutes to convince me to let you live. In that case, mind if I have a cigarette too? That's executioner etiquette, isn't it? Or is that just Hollywood? Just Hollywood, she said, but offered me her pack of cigarettes with her free hand just the same. Her other hand, the one hidden from view inside her jacket, pointed a gun at me. Not of the Hollywood variety. This was a Nambu M57. It would get the job done. Time's ticking. She pulled back the hammer for emphasis. The clicking sent a shiver through my entire being, commanding every single hair to stand at attention. Would you believe me if I said I did it because I love you? I asked, a futile attempt at lightening the mood. The strange thing, though, was that I meant it. Even then, as I looked at her, knowing full well she'd kill me once the smoldering tip of her cigarette reached the filter. Really, Takashi, you did it because you love me. My dad is in jail, Mom's awaiting trial for complicity, and Itsuki is awaiting whether he'll be behind bars for 5 years or 27. I thought you liked Itsuki. I did. But you didn't, I said, while I tried to light the cigarette I kept in the corner of my mouth. It was true. Although I didn't like him at first, he became much like a brother rather than just an in-law after we got married. I didn't look at her as I said it. I was staring at the graffiti frog that had made its appearance on the wall across the train tracks 2 weeks ago. But I knew the face she was giving me. I remembered every line that appeared on her usually smooth skin. You always complained about how he badmouths you to your dad at every opportunity he got. It's the only reason he was going to take over the company. You're smarter, more experienced, and more ambitious than he was or ever would be. It should have been you, and you know it. As for your da... Stop. As for your dad, Hina, he chewed it up, I continued. All of it. She poked me with the barrel of the gun to let me know who was in charge here. That's no reason to have them locked up. True, it wasn't. But it was convenient. For years, even before we got married, she had been complaining about all of them. Her dad most of all. Ever since she was a little girl, she had been preparing to take over her father's company when eventually the time would come. She made sure she got the best grades all throughout primary and middle school. Even at university, She had always been at the top of her class, while on the weekend, she inspected contracts for business deals and saved the company millions by spotting hidden clauses, but none of that mattered. Once Itsuki was born, he was all her dad had cared about. I took a deep drag of my cigarette. Marlboro Gold. I always hated lights. They miss that slight scratching sensation when you inhale. Isn't it, though? 5 years ago, during Christmas, when your dad announced that Itsuki would take over your position as CEO, you said you never wanted to see any of them ever again. I didn't mean that. Then you didn't mean it either when you repeated it after he gave you the opportunity to develop your skills elsewhere, for your birthday, I suppose? She was angrily fingering her cigarette, flicking of ash that wasn't there. I could only hope she was a little more careful with the trigger. I still had 3 minutes left after all. Mind if I get something from the vending machine? I asked. Last meal and all that. I got up before she could give me an answer and walked over to the overpriced candy dispenser. I fumbled in my pocket for my wallet that wasn't there. Can I borrow a 500 yen piece, hun? She didn't move, just raised an eyebrow. Fine. I looked around, but of course there was nobody around at this hour. The parking lot was empty, but for 4 cars. I turned a quarter turn and forced my elbow through the glass. Ah, motherfucker. That looks a lot less painful in the movies. I took 3 packs of Pocky from the machine, careful not to cut my hand on the sharp edges. Strawberry, matcha, and the regular ones. I wasn't sure which ones you liked best. I thought strawberry, but it could have been matcha as well. Anyway, here's both, I said, and sat back down on the hood of my beat-up Honda Odyssey. She didn't try to take any when I offered the box to her. Just took another drag of her cigarette, which was reaching the halfway mark by now. I always liked the original best myself. I took a drag of my own cigarette before taking it from my mouth and taking a bite of 4 of the chocolate-covered sticks at once. Disgusting. I still don't get it. How can you eat and smoke at the same time? I lifted my shoulders in answer and swallowed before blowing out the smoke I'd been holding up in the air to be carried off by the wind. I never had a problem with eating and smoking at the same time. I knew many people who did, though. Back to what I was saying, I did it for us. In return for the evidence about the shipments of cocaine I gave to Nasanto Corp., they offered me 1 billion yen. 1 billion hina. You'd be rid of your family. We could both quit our jobs and move somewhere else. We'd never have to work again. Tell me that doesn't sound like a dream. You wouldn't have to teach at the high school anymore. No more overtime and compulsory socializing with colleagues. Isn't that what you always wanted? Not like this. They are still my family. And how do you think this will look for me? With my family name ruined? I'll be seen as the daughter of some drugs cartel. My parents weren't like that. They didn't even know about it. The arms of the gold-plated station clock twitched. 10:35. The dial was beautifully decorated with the image of a sun that, in the morning, reflected the sunlight so brilliantly that it seemed to shine itself. Now it was barely visible at all. True, that was on Itsuki, but none of that would have happened if you'd been in charge. Besides, your dad will be out in, 3 years? Your mom's sentence will be even shorter. I doubt she'll even have to do any jail time at all. You just don't fucking get it, do you? You think that's the story the media is going to run with? That it was just my brother and the rest of us had nothing to do with it? Sure, I might not be seen as an accomplice, but I'm part of that family. You didn't ruin just them. You ruined all of us. Honestly, I didn't get it. Maybe it was because I'd never been close to my own family, or just because we were rich now and could go wherever we wanted. You took my last name when we married. No one will associate you with them once we move somewhere else. Where'd you want to go? Osaka, or maybe Kochi? You always loved the beach. Hell, we could even go to Europe. You pick a country, and we'll be on the next flight. My eyes were fixed on the entrance of the empty train station. One of the lights illuminating the statue a little to the left of the gates was flickering and drew my attention. It was a statue of a man, but I didn't recognize him. Over the past 6 years I'd been coming here, I'd never taken the time to read the plaque. "You've got about 1 minute left," she said, inspecting the cigarette clutched between her fingers. "I've got to say, you're doing a real bang-up job so far." The gun was still pressed in my side, but it didn't scare me as much anymore. It was just there. "What would you like me to say? That I'll buy you the most beautiful jewelry, a nice car, a big house with a pool? We can have all that if you want, but you already know that." She let another gray cloud escape from her mouth as she nodded. Then she turned to look at me and gave me another look. "Go on." "We could have kids, a boat." She scoffed. "Really? You think having kids will fix this?" "We tried having kids, remember? It didn't exactly work." "We could always adopt them. You used to dream of having a boy and a girl. The boy had to be older, you always said. If we adopt them, you can make sure we get that." She let out a deep sigh. "It's almost time, Takashi. Anything you want to say, I suggest you say it now." I took a drag of my cigarette as I thought it over. Your last words are hard to come up with on the spot. I took another drag while staring at the statue again. Who is the statue of? Takashi? Her tone was annoyed more than angry. She prodded me with the gun once more. Yeah, I'm thinking about it." I looked back at her. Her eyes didn't have any emotion left in them. No love, no anger, no sadness. "I still love you. I'd want those to be my last words. I still love you," I repeated. She shook her head. Then, right as she shot away the still smoldering cigarette butt, the 10:38 train drove into the station. I took a final drag of my cigarette and shot the butt ahead of me. "That's my cue, sayonara, Bernice." Theme parks are the best. The roller coasters rule. But I didn't want to go into the House of Horrors. It looked dark and creepy, and I knew it was full of dead things and madmen, like the pictures on my dad's scary videos. That kind of stuff made my insides squirm and threatened to erupt buckets of puke. But Bernice had the tickets and me by the hand, and she was dragging me along and wouldn't stop. What was I supposed to do? Sit down and cry? I'd look like a baby, and Bernice would laugh. It was the first time she'd talked to me, so I didn't want that. Instead, I let her lead me to that dirty, gray building with the gargoyle-covered, finger-like spires, which rose into the cloudless, midday sky like a giant, concrete hand waiting to grab us. My feet dragged. The ground felt like quicksand. But Bernice kept me out by moving fast, getting us to the looming mansion, safe and sound. I said nothing when she handed the tickets to the bored-looking teenager wearing a Raiders of the Lost Ark t-shirt who was manning the booth. I said nothing when he complained we were too young, but it was okay if we really weren't scared. I said nothing when Bernice told him our parents said it was fine and pulled me through the thick sheets of plastic that hung like strips of flesh in the open door. I could still feel Dad's hand on my shoulder, nudging me on like he had towards Bernice. It was like I was being carried by that same momentum as I stepped forward into the darkness. And then, there I was, in a haunted house in Pleasure Beach, in Blackpool, holding hands with a girl from Northern Ireland. And I couldn't really believe this was me. Because if there was one thing I hated more than monsters, it was girls. Or at least, that's what I thought. Just a few minutes earlier, I'd been eating a burger at a white plastic picnic table on the veranda of the theme park family restaurant, sitting on a wobbly chair and slurping Coke while acting out a battle with my Star Wars toys. That's when I spotted the girl from our hotel, watching me from her seat a few tables away. It made me splutter Coke all over my Goonies t-shirt, because I hadn't expected to see anyone I knew here, so I hadn't been holding back on the sound effects. I tried not to go red as I looked away, sliding Vader and Luke into my lap. But I was glowing with embarrassment, so I failed. Like me, she was eating lunch with her family at one of the flimsy tables crammed into the packed restaurant courtyard. Like me, she was also trying to entertain herself while her parents babbled on about nothing, taking forever to finish eating and wasting precious attraction riding time. Except she was doing it in the less embarrassing way of juggling tennis balls. I knew her name was Bernice because that's what her sisters called her in the hotel lounge every evening, where I read Spider-Man comics and she juggled. She made those balls go so fast, it was hard not to sneak a glance. She never even dropped one, and mostly, she wasn't even paying attention to what she was doing. I tried not to care. I tried not to think she was cool, with her straw-colored hair tied up in pigtails and those freckles on her nose that were kind of cute. But she kept catching me watching, which was annoying. It made her stupid. Older sisters giggle, whisper in her ear, and laugh. I knew they were talking about me. It made my cheeks tingle and burn, so I had to get up and leave the room. I always looked back as I did, and she was always staring after me, and now she'd seen me playing with my Star Wars toys. And for some reason, I felt really dumb. I didn't want to look at her again, with my red face and Coke-stained shirt. But my head wouldn't stop, and when it turned, I got a horrible surprise. Bernice wasn't at her table anymore. She was standing right there beside mine, a tennis ball clutched in each hand. "Hey, my ma'am gave me tickets for a ride. Are you coming?" "What? Are you coming on a ride with me? I'm bored." "Go on, Kev," my dad said, nudging me out of my seat and pushing me towards her. Luke and Vader fell from my knees and hit the flagstones. You kids go ride the Chair O planes. We'll be finished when you get back, and we'll do another roller coaster. I didn't have time to retrieve my toys, and I didn't want to be seen doing it anyway. They were my favorite ones, and I didn't want to lose them. But suddenly, Bernice's eyes and smile seemed more important. She stuffed her tennis balls into the pockets of her jacket, then grabbed me by the hand, and we were off, weaving our way through the tables and crowds out of the restaurant, her sisters staring after us, sticking their tongues out and making kissy noises with their lips. And that was that. Except Bernice didn't want to go on the Chair O planes. And now I was in what looked like the dirtiest of dungeons, with plastic skeletons jiggling on the walls, dim red bulbs barely illuminating the hall, and the sound of recorded screams filling the air. My heart pounded like it was trying to break free, my breath catching with each shadow that stretched from the walls. The darkness seemed to tug at my limbs, squeezing tighter with every screech. I didn't like the plastic vampire sucking on the neck of a mannequin. I didn't like the wax werewolf with its snout stuck in the entrails of a scarecrow. I didn't like the life-size, glowering Jack the Ripper, blocking our path with his blood-stained knife. It wasn't just that. The whole place stank of mothballs and mold, a damp smell that reminded me of Gran's house when we'd gone to clear it out after she died. That same scent of damp or death, I wasn't sure which had stuck with me after just an hour in her house a year before. And it was back now, stronger than ever. And the air didn't just smell bad. It felt bad, like a horrible weight pressing down on me, squeezing the oxygen from my lungs, like Vader using the Force to crush a throat. I hated it, every bit, but Bernice loved it all. She squealed in delight at every discovery, pulling me through the halls at breakneck speed, barely pausing at each horrific sight before barreling us on to the next one, which was good in a way, as I didn't want to be there longer than necessary, but bad in another way, because I'd barely recovered from one scare before another leapt out. Frankenstein's monster staring wide-eyed on a table, blood-chilling. A trio of witches at a smoking cauldron full of bones, nerve-wracking. A pack of rabid dogs with drooling teeth, terrifying. And let's not talk about the clown. I tried not to show I was afraid. I mimicked her shoulders bobbing and her arms swinging when she laughed and joked around, and agreed the scary things were really cool. When she playfully pushed me towards the creature from the Black Lagoon, I made sure my intended yelp came out a giggle. When she said, grabbed my hand, and told me she was scared of Norman Bates, I bravely tightened my grip and said it was fine. I was glad it was dark, because that meant she couldn't see the expressions on my face, or how my eyes were squinting most of the time. I was gladder still when we rounded a final corner and saw the word exit. We were almost out. It had seemed like an age, but was probably only 5 minutes. Somehow, I'd made it without peeing my pants, and she had no reason to think I was a baby. With luck, she might even have forgotten Star Wars, and that's when it all went wrong. "My ball!" she gasped, releasing my hand to search in both her pockets. "I lost one of my balls." "Oh no," I replied, looking at the floor, hoping I'd find it. "When did you lose it?" "I don't know," Bernice snapped, knocking me against the rickety wall as she pushed past. "That's a stupid question. If I knew that it wouldn't be lost, I'm going to find it." She didn't wait for me to answer. Didn't wait at all. Just ran back into the corridor we'd come out of and disappeared. "Bernice!" I shouted, and my face tingled when I said her name aloud. "Wait!" She didn't. I stared at the corner she'd turned, hoping to hear her call back, listening for a trace of her, even her footsteps. But the wails from the speakers, a ghost's testimony. After the living and the dead decided to merge worlds, the Supreme Court was flooded with appeals. With coexist being a hot topic in the first half of the 21st century, most people thought it would be a great idea to create a union between the two worlds. They thought they'd get their loved ones back. They thought they'd get access to generational wisdom from their deceased elders back, and perhaps some old family recipes could finally resurface. People could only think of the missing pieces in their lives that they wanted to finally have sewn up with the help of a familiar, ghostly face around. It was an oversight, to say the least, that with ghosts being almost as accessible as the living, there would now be witnesses for crimes where before there had been none. It actually caused a lot of chaos across the criminal justice system, especially for police officers who had tampered with evidence to shut a case quickly, for gang members who'd offed witnesses to shut their mouths. And it was a goddamn headache for judges who had to reopen every murder case from the last several decades that now suddenly had a victim who could tell their side of the story. But for Jeremy Strout, it was a lifeline. He'd been sitting on death row for 15 years after being convicted of 4 heinous murders, his wife and 3 children. At the time of his conviction, there'd been no one there to defend him, just whispers from neighbors who'd said they'd heard him yelling in his house hours before the bodies were discovered. It didn't help that he was the one who'd called 911 and then was found at the scene of the crime covered in their blood. It didn't help that he'd sought out anger management before in his past. Rumors swam through town like a broken dam, neighbors speculating that he hadn't wanted their 3rd child. That little Harley Sue was a mistake Mrs. Strout made Jeremy keep, and that he'd finally snapped under the pressure of 3 small children and a wife whose fertility had betrayed him. Jeremy had always denied the rumors, claiming that he loved his family. Sure, they had their problems, and he never denied the hardship of not only providing for 3 children under 5, but living under the same roof as them. Nevertheless, he remained adamant in his defense. He would never harm them. Unfortunately, that wasn't enough. Statistically, said the prosecutor, people are more likely to be killed by their spouse than any other person in the world. And of course, Mr. Strout could not leave his children to live after killing Mrs. Strout, because who would take care of the children while he was at work? And if he had not done it, then why so much blood, not only on his clothes, but in his fingernails, wedged between eyebrow hairs and in the wrinkles of his temples? And the even bigger question, if Mr. Strout had not murdered his family, then who did? There had never been another suspect. The police never really took the time to consider one, their minds made up before they could produce an alternative. It really was easier just to blame the husband. What jury wouldn't go for that? Today, our jury gets to hear a new side to the story. Jeremy's defense attorney told the courtroom at his appeal hearing, nearly 2 decades after his family's murders. From Mrs. Strout's perspective, Mr. Alcott enticed the crowd with a smile that said he had a secret, one he was eager to share. Attorneys could be a bit performative in their speeches, and Mr. Alcott was no less confident. The union between the dead and the living truly did save some attorneys' careers, as it had not always been every day that they could produce eyewitness testimony that could turn a case on its heel. Some started getting big heads about it, as if they had more power than the judges, and Mr. Alcott's once regular-shaped head was slowly growing in size. Jeremy, who'd known him since his family's gruesome deaths, knew that Mr. Alcott came from a humble and passionate place. He just wanted to help people. And more than anything on this day, he wanted to help Jeremy. The only problem with ghosts as witnesses was time. The worlds were combined, yes, ghosts were all around. But time for the living and time for the dead, they existed on 2 separate lines, intersecting at points that were not always convenient. Ghosts floated from here to there to here, teleporting across space and time. And their biggest adjustment to being reunited with the living was adhering to the old 3rd-dimensional clock. You could not simply tell a ghost to show up in court at 9 a.m. and expect them to find where that time existed for them. The closest thing living humans had to relate this ghostly state of nonlinear existence was to elderly people with dementia. They hopped from place to place, time to time, without any real sense of how they got there. Ghost therapists, a new occupation created by the psychologists, blended a team of living and dead to try to help condition ghosts into grasping the concept of earthly time. But like any therapy, it was not an immediate remedy. Realistically, Mr. Alcott could only hope that Mrs. Strout would appear in court. But there was no way to be certain she would find her way there at the right time and place of the court hearing. Yet still, he spoke as if there were not a single doubt in his mind. Today, we will get to hear an eyewitness account of the events that took place on October 26, 2023, from one of the victims' perspectives. And how grateful are we that it is now possible. Mr. Alcott turned to face Jeremy Strout, seated at the defense table, shackled at his wrists and ankles, both sets of chains locked in place by a hook on the tabletop and the floor. Jeremy was trembling, just as nervous as he was during his first trial, which certainly had not helped his case. He tapped his feet anxiously, and Mr. Alcott took his seat beside him. "Don't you worry, Jeremy. I've spoken to Mrs. Strout, and I know she wants to be here. She feels just awful that all of this has fallen on you. I have no doubt she will find her way here, even with those kids of yours keeping her busy. Who'd have thought dead kids could still be such a handful?" Ah! Jeremy didn't laugh, so Mr. Alcott cleared his throat. "She's got a wonderful therapist, Jeremy. They've been working really hard on timeliness so she can be here for you today. He's the best therapist around. He worked so hard when he was alive it nearly killed him. Ha! Ha! But really, it was the alcohol that did it." Despite Mr. Alcott's poor humor, his assurances did give Jeremy hope. After all, That was all he had left. The courtroom remained mostly silent as the hours carried on, everyone waiting, now accustomed to the concept of ghostly testimonies, and also of their inability to make prompt appearances. If people had thought court cases dragged on before, waiting on a dead person to show up had made the old ways seem swift. Every so often, as the clock ticked, a ghost would find themselves in the pews alongside the other patient attendees, causing a stir in the crowd. An elderly man piped up around the second long hour, reminiscing. I remember when they built this courthouse in 1949. Apparently, he had been a little boy with a dream of becoming the president one day. At the time, fascinated by the building's exterior columns and interior mahogany. On the third hour, a child ghostling chased a ball around the courtroom, giggling about how his dad used to work upstairs. On the fourth hour, a former janitor peeked his head in to see if the garbage needed to be changed. It was the fifth hour when the judge, who had spent nearly all of the hours engrossed in a book, announced that if Mrs. Strout did not find her way here in 10 minutes, her testimony would have to be rescheduled and the court would be adjourned. Jeremy's foot resumed its tapping. Mr. Alcott nudged him, winking. She'll be here. Jeremy's hope was nearly run dry when the clock struck 5 hours and 11 minutes since the court hearing was set to start. The banging from the judge's gavel was still resounding, while a symphony of people gathering their things and sighing at the wasted day trickled across the room. All of it was at just the perfect volume for Mrs. Strout's meager voice to almost be missed. Almost. "Hello?" she said. "Hello? Did I make it on time?" The noise in the room was like a faucet sputtering out until it finally stilled. Everyone froze in their tracks and turned towards the voice to find an equally meager and transparent figure seated at the witness stand. When Jeremy laid eyes on her, she looked as beautiful as the day he married her. Not appearing in the form in which one died was a feature of ghosthood that all appreciated. "Senora," Jeremy whispered. At her name, the ghost frantically searched for its source. When she landed on Jeremy, relief softened and warmed her face. "Jeremy." She smiled. Then, as if her reason for being here suddenly rushed to her mind, she jerked towards the judge, who was still frozen in his half-standing, half-seated stance, considering if he should allow this hearing to take place. "Your Honor, you have to set him free. He's innocent. Please," she pleads. "Senora, where are the kids?" Jeremy asked worriedly. His ghastly wife faced him again. "They're fine, dear. Well, they're dead, but they're fine. They're at the park, playing." Jeremy thought of little Harley Sue, not even 2 when she passed, off at the park playing without an adult. Senora read his expression. "I figure not much else can happen to them now." She shrugged, forcing a laugh. Mr. Alcott, who was already up on his feet, cleared his throat and approached the judge's bench, nodding a hello to Mrs. Strout. "Your Honor, would you please allow Mrs. Strout to give her testimony? We've waited all this time, and if we prolong it any further, we cannot guarantee her appearance again." The judge was tired and hungry and ready to sit on his couch and kick his feet up, but he was also reasonable. He surrendered a sigh. All right, Mr. Alcott," court reinstated. He tapped his gavel, and the jurors all groaned as they found their seats again. "Make it quick, Mrs. Strout. We had all day, but that day is nearly gone." Mr. Alcott turned to Jeremy, giving him 2 thumbs up. Jeremy released all of the air he was holding on to. Mrs. Strout nodded and straightened in her seat, running her hands across her lap as if to flatten her dress. Out of habit, most ghosts seemed to retain this gesture. Mrs. Strout inhaled before she spoke. The day I died, there was a harvest moon on the rise. The children were loud, and the house was a mess, and the fridge was nearly empty. I hadn't gotten to laundry in over a week. It was a pretty typical day in our house, actually, Mrs. Strout joked. Only a few in the room offered an empathetic laugh. The judge was less patient. Mrs. Strout, while I have sympathy for your tragic death and the death of your 3 children, you are here to tell us if it was that man, Mr. Jeremy Strout, who did it. We do not need a bedtime story. Jeremy flinched at another man telling his wife what to do. Let her speak. The judge shot him a daring gaze. Mr. Alcott squeezed his shoulder. Senora thanked him with her eyes, but behind them was a painful secret rising to the surface. Of course, Your Honor. I know I've already taken up a lot of your time, she said, addressing the whole courtroom full of people. Then she looked down at her lap, twiddling her fingers. The truth is, my children and I were killed by one of their parents. A gasp echoed across the walls of the room, and an uproar of whispers scattered like static. Mr. Alcott and Jeremy shared a confused stare. The judge banged his gavel. Order! Order! Everyone started to hush, but it wasn't until Senora shouted that silence fully resumed. But it wasn't Jeremy! Senora was crying now, looking directly at her husband. I'm so sorry, she sobbed. Jeremy's foot stopped bouncing. His mind was trying to solve an impossible puzzle. All these years, people had assumed he had murdered his entire family, but the truth was, he honestly didn't know what had happened to them. Just like he'd told the police, he'd come home from a long day at work and walked into the most horrific and life-shattering scene he'd ever witnessed. No one believed him. Senora's sobs were the only sound in the courtroom as everyone patiently waited for her to collect herself. Thankfully, Kleenex had developed a ghost-friendly facial tissue, and one of the guards brought it over to her. She wiped her eyes and spoke sternly, as if she had not just been wailing with abandon. Your Honor, you need to release my husband from prison right now. What are you saying, Senora? Jeremy whispered. The next words that Jeremy's wife spoke were undeniably the most important of his entire life. More life-altering than the ones spoken by the police who arrested him and the judge who convicted him. Senora's words freed Jeremy Strout from a prison death sentence and cleared his name of all criminal charges, but in the same instance, her words shackled him all over again, leaving him forever haunted by the truth, in too deep. Sean sat alone in a dark confession booth, fighting back his tears. The mesh slat to his right took the shape of the crucifix. A door clicked open, and light shone through the slat, before vanishing as the door shut. I wondered if I would see you again, said the priest, sitting beyond the divider to Sean's right. The devil sat on his left. Read it to me one more time, Father, Sean said. The voice that spoke through the crucifix was soft. I would be more help if you just told me. Please, Father, don't. Just read me the passage. There was a slight shuffle of papers, and the priest began. Forthwith Judas came to Jesus and said, Hail, Master, and kissed him. Then they came, laid hands upon Jesus, and took him. Without a word, Sean left. Moonlight spilled across the Liffey while the sound of beer bottles clattering carried from the other side of the river. Sean meandered with his hands stuffed in his coat pockets, while his breath fogged in the cold air. A set of headlights crept from behind, casting his shadow lankly across the cobblestone. Finn, called a hushed voice from behind. Finn, where the heck have you been? I've been looking all over for you. Sean tensed, not wanting that name to follow him. Not tonight. He turned and held up a gloved hand, blocking the car's light. All he could see was the shadow hanging out of the driver's window, but he recognized the voice. It was his handler. Christy? Feck's sakes. Christy stepped out of the car and closed the door, the sound loud in the quiet street. He paced over to Sean and they walked together. Sean sighed. I'm sorry I had to... See the fecking priest again? Christy touched Sean's shoulder and continued. Finn, it'll be all right, lad. We're almost there. 5 years of hard work and it's all about to pay off. He released a large breath. The vapor rose and faded. Feels longer. Sean knew the question was coming and wondered whether Christy genuinely cared about his visit to the priest, or if he was simply trying to maintain a sense of familiarity. 5 years, and Christy was the only one from the outside Sean was allowed to contact. He'd requested a therapist, and Christy had come back a month later with the response, "Can't, lad. Too risky. Anything you need to get off your chest, you tell me." How could he tell Christy he wanted out of the gig? After 5 years of being deep undercover within the largest criminal gang in Ireland, how could he share his doubts now? So, began Christy. The question, the reason he was here, incoming, have they told you who you're going to whack? Sean walked over to the river's railing and placed his hands upon it. Neil, he muttered. What? No, he said. Don't be so hard on yourself. The guard's never going to let one of their own commit murder, not even to off some degenerate. Sean nodded. As soon as you know anything, and I mean anything, location, victim, accomplices, you let me know and I'll pass it on. Conspiracy to commit murder. That's all we need. Besides, I shan't be hard to find. I'm stuck chauffeuring around the old Bell and Michiel. God knows I want to put that cranky so-and-so in cuffs myself. All right? Sean nodded again. The truth lay on his tongue, involved in a bitter feud with a lie. Christy, he said as his handler headed back to the car. Christy turned, the headlights again shining and making him appear like an obscure shadow. You right? Sean opted for the truth. Tomorrow. The hits tomorrow. The next day, Sean met Liam, Michiel's son and Sean's unwitting informant, at the Gaelic Warrior Boxing Club. The 6 a.m. session stunk to high heaven with sweat, while the sound of dozens of gloves smacking pads filled the large shed. Sean climbed the steps onto the main ring where Liam watched Patrick, the bullman Doherty, a young gun who eyed the world title. Finn, said Liam, what's the crack? They clapped hands and embraced. The first thing Sean wanted to do was to ask about the hit, but he was well practiced in pretending to be someone he wasn't, so he kept his conversation cordial, waiting for Liam to bring it up. How's he going? Sean asked, gesturing at the bullman, who was busting a sharp combo on his trainer's pads. Liam tilted his head, a habit usually reserved for discussing drug trafficking, and muttered, He's got talent, but he's a bit of a hothead. I should get him in with you, teach him how to stay calm. Calm? Sean laughed. I don't remember being calm. I just remember being belted. Nonsense, said Liam. I didn't take you on 'cause you can scrap. I manage hundreds of boxers. They can all do that. You can handle pressure, Finn. That's why we chose you for today. Sean's insides tensed, but his eyes remained unflinching. Nothing I ain't done before. Sean hadn't told Christy the entire truth last night. He had told him the hit was going to be today, which it was. He also said he didn't know who they were taking out or where, and that was the truth. But he had said Liam wouldn't be there, and that was bollocks. "Well, you ain't done none like this," said Liam. "It's a Garda, a dirty coppa." Sean looked towards the boxing class taking place on the floor, hiding his reaction from Liam. Cold air swept over his skin. His shoulders shuddered, and his mind flashed to images from 4 years ago. He was 27, and the bright lights dazzled overhead. The coach was there, but he hardly remembered him. He remembered Michial and Liam in his corner. His opponent was some hard-bred scouser, as bald as a hard-boiled egg, with a mashed nose and a bitter scowl. The scouser eyeballed Sean, and Sean was shit-scared. "Don't worry about that prick," Liam had said. "He don't look tough. It's some inbred deformity." Sean turned and leant over the corner ring. Michial rubbed his shoulders, speaking sternly. "Come out with 3 fast jabs. Bam, bam, bam. He'll slip the last one, then pow right hook. You tracking?" Sean nodded and spat out agreement over his mouthguard. "All right," said Liam. "Give him hell." The bell dinged. It had been a tough fight, one that went the distance, and when it was all over, the name Finn was called out. He'd won, and the rest of the night was a blur down at Temple Bar. But before the first pint was raised, Sean had been overcome with a feeling, a deep relaxation that settled itself across every inch of his skin. A feeling that told him he didn't have to watch over his shoulder anymore. A feeling that said, "Relax. They trust you. And you trust them. You trust me, don't you, Finn?" Liam patted his shoulder. Sean swallowed and turned back to face him. "Of course I do," he said, his heart burning. That same flame that used to cinder at almost every conversation in his first year while he wormed his way in. Now they had discovered he was undercover, that he was a rat, and they were going to off him. "Good," Liam said. "Trust is important." A car pulled up in the drive, visible beyond the shed's rolled-up door. Christy stepped out of the front, shot Sean a troubled glance, and opened the back door. Michael, the old-school hardman and head of the largest drug-trafficking cartel in all of Europe, stepped out. Michial, gray-haired with a stalwart face, raised his hand and beckoned the 2 men. "Come on, lads. Christy's driving." In the back seat, Sean kept his arms folded, squeezing his rib cage as it rose and fell with measured breaths. Liam was on his left, silent and staring out the window as the streets of Dublin flitted by. "I've been in this game for over 30 years, said Michel from the front seat. "And I'll tell you one thing, I've learned a lot. Firstly, if it falls into your lap, then it's too good to be true. Left here," he said to Christy. Christy flicked the indicator. "If you tell me the location, I can just punch it into maps." "No," said Michial. "Where we're going, I don't want the phone to remember." Christy's eyes burrowed into Sean through the rear-view mirror. Michial's gnarled finger appeared in the space between the 2 front seats, and he continued. "Second thing relates to the first. Be careful who you let in. The people you shouldn't trust, the ones who are out to get you, they make it easy. Make your life seem easy, I mean. Anything worthwhile is earned through hard work. Same goes for loyalty. The same thing I'm telling you, Finn. I've been telling Liam all my life. If it comes easy, it's cheap." Apart from the occasional direction from Michial, the rest of the drive was silent, although Sean was in constant communication to the Lord. "God Almighty, I ask for your courage as I venture once more into the crossroads. I'm torn between lives and ashamed to admit I have worn a mask for so long that I have forgotten my own face. I used to honor this job, finding those who lived between the cracks of a broken system. but I find myself slipping deeper into the same space with each passing hour. I am in too deep, and I fear the greater sin, to break my oath to the Garda Síochána, or to turn my back on what has become my family. I'm to blame, Father. I sowed the seeds of betrayal, and now I reap the bitter harvest. As Dublin has witnessed my struggle, may the heavens hear my plea. Pull me from this labyrinth, Lord, once and for all. Amen. Christy pulled up at Ballymun, just north of the M50. Their destination was a large pasture that stretched between Dublin Airport and a litter-filled caravan park. "We're walking," said Michial. The clouds above were a lamb of gray, and although the grass was short, the men seemed to trudge. They were heading in the direction of the airport, by the pasture's boundary, where a snarl of bushes clambered along a chain-link fence. A shovel stood pressed into a mound of dirt, and beneath that opened a wide and deep hole. "You really think we trusted you, you fucking rat?" said Michial, turning around with a black pistol in his hand. Sean closed his eyes, trying to dampen his blazing heart. His lungs pulled in a thick breath of air, which only fed the fire more oxygen. He wanted to cry like he almost did in the confession booth, and figured he very well might. Why not? Sean opened his eyes and saw the pistol aimed straight at Christy. "He's an undercover," said Michiel. "Been pretending to be my driver, all the while sniffing around my backside." Christy's hands were up, his eyes wide as headlights. "Number I'm no coppa." "Dirty bastard," said Liam, as he pulled out a pistol of his own, a small silver revolver. Mitchell pointed at his son's gun. "Finn, you're doing the honors." Liam held out the revolver. "Do this, and you're one of us, for true." Sean took the revolver, which was heavier than he anticipated. It sat in his palm, the same size as his hand. The bullet's golden casings stuck out from the chambers. One sat by the pin, anticipating the spark that would explode Sean, free from the maze that had become his life. He just didn't know where to aim it, at Michiel or Christy. "Who owns this pasture?" Sean heard himself say. "Don't worry," said Michelle. "I know the farmer. The land is only ever used for grazing. The hole's deep, and they don't crop here. The soil will never be disturbed. No one will find him." Sean took a moment, hearing the screech of a plane's engine as it readied for takeoff. Then he aimed the gun at Christy. "On your knees." Christy took a step back. "You can't be serious." "God damn it, get on your knees." Christy began to bend. "Turn around," said Sean, not wanting to see his face. "Turn around and get on your knees." Christy's eyes were darting around as if trying to find some sense in the world. He turned and got on his knees. "Please," he began. "Please, please, please, Jesus Christ. Please, God, please." Sean stepped behind Christy and held the gun to his head. Off in the distance, a plane began its long ascent into the clouds above. "Please," mumbled Christy. "Sean, please." Sean leant down, kissed Christy on the cheek, and whispered in his ear, "My name is Finn. Psst, Jill killed Jack. I very much need some socks, pretty please, with sugar on top." This was the text that I sent to my estranged ex-wife, the one who wanted to drag me out to the wilderness under the guise of talking about financing our first child's entrance into college. I knew that she was old-fashioned and wanted to push me from a hill, just like Fellini. So my last request was not very sinister. I mean, even death row inmates should get some free laundry or a meal, maybe even a prayer. I looked into the pantry of my rental and decided there was no good food. bachelor food is disgusting when you leave it in the fridge for a week. I needed my dog. Hey, can we bring the dog? I knew that Caspian hated hiking just as much as me. It was like walking without purpose, like smelling flowers just to get allergies. I also knew that if Michelle threw me over a cliff and I was able to not immediately die, then Caspian the burner could theoretically pull me up with a rope. I decided to wear my flax Bermuda-styled shorts, which can be unwoven and turned into rope or a joint. She did not immediately text back and scold me for overpacking. This was a good sign because I had previously said I would find some kind of therapy. She wanted a stranger to break my will, make me cry, pay for the breaking, and send me back all trained. Also, I had a very large life insurance policy at the time. Husband therapy is kind of like dog training, but the wife forgets that she has to remember the commands, or the husband will forget, and the 2 weeks and $1,500 in Idaho won't take. She has to reinforce the electric shock therapy, the way the husband therapist swings a hand like windshield wipers and asks if my mother ever touched me inappropriately. It was just 38 minutes before the murder. Hike. In Knights of Calabria, Fellini taught us that a kind whore will get many marriage proposals, walk up to the mountain of love with all her savings, and get thrown over the mountain by her fake fiancé. I decided to pack like Fellini. I went up to my rented room and looked for all the things that could be lugged in a hefty garbage bag suitcase. There was the square bottle with a ship that my grandfather had constructed with tweezers. Nah, he's dead. There were piles of clothes on the ground. These kept me from bringing a drunk woman home. No one wants to make love next to dirty laundry. That's pretty gross if they do. I saw pictures of my kids when they were young and realized they were getting old, going to college, all taking medications to avoid giving me grandkids. I looked at the pillows. They were stiff, so I used them only to prop up a cell phone to watch Italian movies. It was better to pillow on a wad of sweaters and save the neck. I went into the closet and found my mafia money. It was just an envelope from the bank full of cash because I hate wasteful tipping. For some reason, the kids at the register have a very difficult time begging for tips of cash when they only punched in buttons. They do not have this problems with cards because they say, "Please follow the instructions on the screen," when they ask for 30%, 40%. One of the cashiers actually said my card was declined because he hit the 50% tip option for me. I use cash so the kids can beg like adults. There is no need for great cash when your former estranged spouse wants to go hiking in the wilderness. Also, I think she is bitter because of the dating. She pretends she doesn't mind that much, but always gets me drunk and asks for details. I don't know what I tell her half the time. I see a bottle of Canadian Mist, whiskey, that was purchased for toothaches and bladder infections. It is not a very good bottle of whiskey, but it is lightweight since half of it is missing. It is best to be slightly inebriated before being thrown off a cliff. Also, the fall hurts less. I packed the whiskey. Now my closet is executive clean. I have 10 handkerchiefs laid out in case one of the kids gets married. Handkerchiefs are the required minimum for a gentleman of the ages. You can offer the spare to a woman in tears. You can use the linen to avoid touching bathroom knobs. It makes a wonderful mask in the case of desperate last-minute need for larceny. I love handkerchiefs. I packed 10 in the garbage bag, knowing that large puncture wounds should be full of gauze. For this reason, I had to return the silk hankies. It is better for the absorbent cotton in case of a fall. What else? It was a tiny room with windows facing the main road in town. The firemen and police went up and down the road trying to find an entrance to Starbucks. They put in a one-way driveway to be tricky. I had some bills on my desk, but I didn't want to bring these to the afterlife. I decided to quickly pay for my parking bill because I didn't want my extra truck to get towed if I should be in the community hospital for very long. I said a small, "Thank you, God," because 2 of our 3 nurses had wanted to date, but you should never date medical people in a small town. Amputations happen when you are not a gentleman. What else? Sheets? Number comforter for comfort? Number Michelle had felt bad that I was cold without her cuddles and bought a comforter matching certain parts of her body. Peach. It was definitely a distraction if ever a gentleman has lady company. A man should have his bed colored in very serious colors, perhaps gray and black, and I needed a multi-tool. A multi-tool is the American version of a Swiss Army knife. It is neither a knife nor from the Swiss. Our multi-tools should be from Leatherman because they have pliers and blades, which do not fold back on fingers. They have finger locks. Unfortunately, I had the Lowe's knockoff multi-tool, which had already severed half of a finger. A nurse, who I did not date, stitched it back on with some weird thread that was supposed to dissolve. She kept sticking that fishhook needle and whispering, "Does it hurt? Does that hurt? What if I do this?" I didn't go back to remove the stitches, which didn't shrink or get dissolved. The nerve was actually clipped by the fake multi-tool, and I can feel the rain coming 5 days before the weatherman now. I put the multi-tool in the garbage bag with the whiskey and the handkerchiefs. 22 minutes. Now, in the smallest case that Michelle actually wanted to talk about paying for our kids' college and not throw me over the cliff, I was prepared to bring a checkbook. I would argue that the check should be endorsed to the child herself. Michelle would argue that kids might spend all the money drinking and whoring like their father. I resented that comment because our town didn't actually have any real prostitutes. In order to avoid the impasse of how the child will spend the money for education, Michelle would push me over the cliff, wait 6 weeks, and get my life insurance. She didn't like long and sustained arguments because she was taking yoga. I decided to bring my checkbook and not transfer any money into the account. What would they say? "We're sorry. He has the money in a money market, but we cannot legally transfer this money to you. Is he around?" Then she would feel really silly about kicking the goose over the glade. It is important for husbands and fathers to always be useful. Do not teach them how to start a BBQ grill. They will inevitably become vegans and hire a gardener. They will keep the seat down and the toothpaste caps fully engaged. The planned obsolescence of a man starts with money. Try to get your spouse fired. In my case, this was not possible. She worked for the state. So after so many decades, the man is not necessary. He must be thrown from the hill under the guise of good health. His dog may or may not follow, depending if the man fed the dog in the last few months. Dogs are ultimately loyal to the person who puts kibble in the bowl. It is nothing personal. 16 minutes till death. The waning sun reminded me, you could throw her down the hill. Wow, I never considered murder for life, insurance, or love. I never considered her last words. Would she fall down the hill and say, "I was just kid, ding"? Wow. This was huge. It didn't seem very noble to throw a former wife down a hill. I don't know what was going on with Jack and Jill, but I bet it wasn't his idea to get any water. Notice that Jack broke his crown, head, long before Jill slipped on the murder weapon. Moral: do not go up hills for water. Water likes to be lower due to gravity. I knew that a former spouse did not really care about my good health, never dying due to exercise, but I also felt she would bring me some socks out of duty. She is prideful like that. She wants her man to die with clean socks because a coroner will look for the meaning of death and should not be confused by bad odors, nor have to cut the socks off the body. They get stiff with grime. Also, 11 minutes. I really wanted to get some veneers before death. It seems really creepy to have a perfect white smile in death but hide the blemishes with a beard in life. The coffee struggle had taken its toll. I have never heard of anyone suing Starbucks for their loss of white. How would you even quantify the loss? You Honor, I was going to get a new hot wife, but I couldn't smile due to Starbucks stains. How much did that cost you, Mr. Go-Round? The lady from San Jose had stock options of Oracle. She's probably a billionaire. I lost this opportunity because of Starbucks stains. I would never smile. Can you show me your receipts? No, Honor. I paid in cash to avoid needless tipping. How do we know you didn't stain your teeth from Pete's coffee? Pete's roast gives me heartburn. Can you prove this heartburn? Ouch. It was going to be just like the cigarette debacle. If you smoke one Marlboro in your life, you cannot blame Camels for your cancer. Tobacco manufacturers know this and promote community smoking to destroy the single source theory. 7 minutes. In my last 7 minutes of life, before Michelle brought the dog in the Prius, before the socks were delivered, and she had a large aluminum canister of water filled with melatonin to knock me out at the summit. She knows I get sleepy near the summit. Contrary to popular notions, St. Bernards and their cousin dog, the Bernese mountain dog, do not actually have smelling salts in their saliva glands. They cannot lick you to consciousness. They usually have less than a tankard of whiskey around their neck, because the whiskey is meant to fortify the dog in bad weather. Some share, that is true. But mostly the large dog will watch you falling into snoring, as the Michelle commands that he uses his large head to push his former master over the hill. The dog will think it is just a game since his eyes are poor on telescopic visions. He cannot tell if the cliff is a few feet or a few leagues. He will actually get excited to be playing a lazy game where he doesn't have to fetch and get sweaty. My poor dumb dog will be an accomplice to murder. No, if not for my own sake, I must think of California law, how they will eventually kill Caspian because he was a man killer. The law does not care if it was his idea or the woman. He will be taken to the Black Ops section of the SPCA and ethically sent to heaven. They are very moral about these things, and overcrowding is at an all-time high. Please remember to spray and neuter your pet to avoid euthanasia. My body? I need something reflective for the Air Force. She will probably bring me to Fort Ord to hike. They are an inactive Army base. This is why we need the Air Force to gather my remains. 1 minute. What the hell can they see from outer space? I decided to wrap myself in mylar. I would go out looking like a Chinese spy balloon. Someone would find this story and know. It wasn't the dog's fault after all. I will try to come back to edit this. She just arrived with a Prius. The dog looks hungry. You have no idea what you are getting into. I am no saint, but no one really is. Some people are less evil. Some people are more evil. I have done things I am not proud of, and will have to live with the consequences once they come. I do, however, refuse to feel guilt for what I have done. There are reasons behind my actions, and no one will convince me they are not for the greater good. I am writing here in my diary to be able to get it off my chest, as I cannot speak to anyone about it. I wish I could scream it from the top of my lungs, but I can't. If the secret comes out, it probably will be huge. The local media are already talking about it, and when they catch whoever did it, it will be loud. In my mind, I am a hero, but in people's eyes, I will not be. If anyone is reading this, probably after I have been caught, know this. I refuse to feel bad about it. I meant what I did every time. My heart is pounding with excitement, but I close my notebook and rest my head on the wall behind me. I've been doing my assignments for over a year already, but even thinking about them makes my heart race. It gives me rush, flushes my cheeks, and keeps me motivated to keep going. I love everything about it. I look at the time on my watch and get off the bed. Time for my double shift at the bar. I put on one of my tightest blouses with low cleavage, comfortable jeans, and tie my hair in half up, half down style. Touch of lipstick, mascara, shoes, and I am ready to go. As I walk out of the house, I feel the cold breeze tickle my skin and I shiver. I hate cold. As fast as I can, I lock the door and rush to the car. When I arrive at the bar, there are quite a few customers in already, even though it is only 5 p.m. I drop my bag off at my locker and wash my hands before I walk out to the main room. The music isn't very loud yet, thankfully. The outside daylight is still shining through, ruining the night out vibe, and people are divided between drinking coffees or beers. No spirits in their hands just yet. I make small talk with the colleague I'm taking over from before they leave, and I make my way to the right side of the bar to check if all fruits and garnishes are restocked and ready for the night. For those who never worked at a bar, they never are after a day shift. I slice lemons and oranges, moving on to the limes, when I hear the sound of a metal knocking gently on the polished wooden bar. I look up and immediately smile. My partner in crime is here. She is the most gorgeous woman I have ever met. Has long, curly black hair, bright blue eyes, and a smile I could not stop thinking about. I pour her a whiskey on the rocks and without a word, let her casually look around for the first 10 minutes. "Is your cockroach here already?" I ask, and she shakes her head. "I don't expect him here so early," she replies with a soft sigh. "Besides, I wanted to give you some attention before I see him." I smile and roll my eyes. "Lizzie, keep your flirting skills for the boys. I know what a sneaky little snake you are." She laughs at my joke, but doesn't reply. "How did you meet this one?" She grabs her glass and swirls it around, watching the almost melted ice cubes float in circles. "I accidentally bumped into him at the grocery store, very conveniently wearing one of my cutest dresses. We have been chatting on my fake phone for a week now. And he is definitely the one that did it?" I almost whisper, leaning closer towards her face. "Yes, Polly. He did do all of those unspeakable things to that girl a year ago." She whispers back, and I can smell the whiskey coming from her breath. "Then his rich daddy hired a lawyer, paid off some of the important people, and the cockroach is enjoying his life." She puts the glass down and straightens back in her chair. Not for long, though. We make small talk as the time goes, in between me serving customers until about 6 p.m. when the cockroach walks in. He is a tall man with brown, messy hair, sharp jawline, and dressed nicely in some expensive clothes. I can't tell you what brand they are because I know nothing about it, but the way he wears them with cockiness, I can tell he spent money. His dad's money, I remind myself, and continue wiping the already clean bar, trying to make myself look busy. Liz gets up from her chair, greets him with a kiss on the cheek, and sits back down in front of me. They order a round of drinks, and she starts to work her magic. They spend hours on chatting and laughing, although I know Liz is faking it. She always does. When the clock strikes 9 p.m. and her date is pretty tipsy, they order the next round of drinks. I make them and turn my back to the camera to grab the lemon off the cutting board, with the pill between it and my finger, and I drop it in his drink. When he starts talking incoherently, Liz grabs his arm and quietly walks him out of the bar. I wait a few minutes before I ask my colleague to look after the bar as I need a quick break and leave as well. I find them in a back alley, the cockroach sitting sloppily on the floor, resting his back and head on the wall, and Liz standing above him, looking at her phone. As soon as I walk up to them, she looks up. I spoke to his victim. The girl was still so upset about what happened. She whispers, with anger in her eyes. This piece of... He took something away from her she will never get back. He deserves what is coming his way. I don't reply, but nod in agreement. I look at the guy's face and feel disgusted that he not only felt it was okay to do what he did, but also decided consequences are not for him to handle. My stomach feels tight, something heavy like rocks growing inside it. I am not sure if it is from nerves, stress, disgust, or excitement from what is coming. It is Liz's time to deal with the man, and I need to get back to work soon enough. I help her tie his hands and feet, put him in the boot of the rented car, and turn to Liz. He should have admitted and faced the punishment, I hear Liz say as she slowly walks towards the driver's door. She isn't looking at me, and I am not sure if she is talking to herself or me. He is a gross, creepy cockroach who has done something horrible and he needs to pay. The smug smile he had on his face when the case was dismissed, knowing he got away with it. I see her shake her head in the streetlight falling on her from above. Well, he didn't. They don't anymore. I whisper back and walk into the bar. HIM. I can feel the headache getting worse as the shouts don't end. Mr. Robertson came to report his son's missing, but ever since we took all the information and said we will look into it, he has been shouting at various officers. He wanted the whole station up at this moment and searching for his son. We tried explaining to him that we will not be able to find him within the next hour, so when he kept shouting, we threw him out, threatening with a ticket. I spin around in my chair to look at the cork board again, but feel hopeless. Missing men keep being added to it, but no more clues have been discovered. I feel like a complete idiot. Ryder Robertson's picture have now been added to the right side of the board, alongside Henry's, Lewis's, Christian's, and Jake's. All of these men, various ages, occupations, and lives, have been missing, and it was my job to find them. I hear someone walking up to my desk, and I turn to see my partner Jesse. I could put an egg on your head and would be able to fry it within a minute, he says and smiles at his joke, but I don't smile back. I am too tense. Hey, I know it is hard, but with a new victim, there is a possibility for potential clues. I nod without saying anything and turn back to the board. Maybe walk me through what connects these men. Sometimes speaking things out loud helps to see things that could have been missed. I sigh but agree, for the sake of not having any other ideas. Henry, aged 54, went missing in April 2023. In February 2023, he was found not guilty for domestic violence on his wife. Lewis, aged 22, missing in July 2023. There was an old report to the police about attacking his ex-girlfriend, but she came back to retract the report, saying they just argued and she was okay. Chris went missing only a week after Lewis. They are the same age. I don't, however, have anything that links him to the rest of the guys, so maybe he is not part of it. Jake, aged 32, went missing in December 2023. Only 3 months after his lawyer argued that 5 women that came forward from his company about inappropriate behavior towards them were unstable emotionally and had a vendetta against him. So the case was dismissed. And now we have Ryder, who a year ago assaulted a girl, but somehow the DNA samples the doctors collected disappeared right before the trial. All of them have been seen with a woman at a bar the night before they went missing. So, the only thing that connects these men are vile actions against women. What if the women did it? I laugh and roll my eyes. Yes, because the experienced detective didn't think of that. I will check with the girl from Ryder's case, but all others have rock-stone alibis. I pinch the bridge of my nose with my fingers and rub it, trying to get rid of the headache. Soon enough, this case will be assigned to someone else, since I can't seem to get any leads. And this would be an absolute nightmare for a young, ambitious detective like me. I needed to get at least something to keep me going. "I think you need a drink," Jesse says, and I look at him from under my eyebrows. "When we're done tonight, we are going out. And," he says quickly, raising his finger to stop me from interrupting. I will not take no for an answer. So here I am now, at the bar, sipping my beer and listening to Jesse vent about the argument with his girlfriend. I politely nod, but only listen to every third word because the focus is escaping me too quickly. I love him like a brother, but help me God with how much he talks. I look around the bar, trying to look casual, but the moment my eyes land on her, there is nothing casual about me. She walks in with her long strawberry blonde hair, gorgeous black dress, and boots heeled so high, I am surprised she isn't falling every second step. But she has this confident aura about her. She has her head held high like she owns this bar, and I am mesmerized. Jesse notices that because he stops talking and nudges me with his elbow. "Go, speak to her," he says with a smirk. "Undust your flirting techniques, wipe the cobwebs, and go." And so I do. I get up, still holding my drink, and sit down next to her at the bar. "Do you mind if I sit next to you?" I ask, and she turns, looking at me with big brown eyes. She smiles. "Of course not." She answers softly. "My name is Polly." "Alex," I say, and shake her hand. "Let me buy you a drink, Polly, if that's okay. Just another dead girl underwater." Trigger warning. Implications of death, violence, and sexual harassment. By the time the fisherman finds me, I will have been dead for 33 hours, 6 minutes, and 29 seconds. 18 hours since the police declared me missing. 15 hours since Zoe told my biology teacher that my tent was empty, that I hadn't returned from the party we'd snuck out to the night before. Careful, quiet, every twig a possible snitch. It was exhilarating, our hearts pounding, the smell of pine and seaweed thick in the air, and the moon a perfectly curved sickle. Zoe held my sweaty hand and didn't let go until we'd passed the tents and joined the others by the lake. The music on someone's phone was turned down just low enough for us to make out Billie Eilish's raspy voice. One of the guys offered us a beer, kept cool in the pitch-black lurking water. I remember thinking I couldn't tell where the lake ended and the forest began. The first article published by a local newspaper reads, "Promising high school student missing after night swim in lake." Shortly after, the water rescue service and fire brigade take over the search. Dogs comb the area, their noses trailing through the damp earth. A human chain forms, people moving slowly through the woods, eyes scanning for any sign of me. Even a helicopter hovers overhead, its whirring blades slicing through the heavy, charged air. The search drags on for hours, stretching into the twilight, yet the woods remain silent. The police begin to ask questions. When was she last seen? What was she wearing? Had she been drinking? Did she seem out of character? Angry? Sad? Suicidal? No, no, and no. She was singing. She was dancing. She seemed happy. When the fisherman finds my body, miles away from where I was last seen, certainty sets in. The autopsy reveals a hematoma on my head and purple spots behind my ears. The coroners examine the water in my lungs and confirm that I wasn't dead before entering the water. I died by drowning. My classmates are questioned again. Zoe claims to have left early, while I stayed behind with her twin brother, Tom, who has been in love with me since middle school. Tom's behavior strikes the police as odd. He insists he barely spoke to me, despite people seeing us leave the party together for a few minutes. When my body is examined, traces of Tom's skin are found on my clothes, trapped between the fabric layers. Still, Tom sticks to his story, perhaps because the truth would embarrass him for some reason. Or maybe he's just afraid of the questions that would follow and the scrutiny that might come with them. Tom is right, in the broadest sense. We really only exchanged 3 or 4 sentences that night, but only because Tom's mouth was otherwise occupied with me. I had enjoyed every second of it, and looking back, I wish I'd given him a real chance. But I was too worried about what other people might think. So, as usual, I brushed him off, leaving him to walk away from the party feeling hurt. Cassandra insists she heard Zoe and me arguing that night, just before Zoe headed back to the campsite. According to her, we were fighting over Tom. Of course she would say that. What else would 2 girls argue about if not a boy? Cassandra even claims that Zoe pushed me, though Zoe denies it vehemently. She denies discussing Tom at all, insisting it was about something else, something that wouldn't come to light until much later, when our biology teacher became a suspect. But Cassandra holds firm to her version. The thing about Cassandra is that she's always been a shadow, the kind of girl whose name teachers forget after 2 weeks of spring break. Kelly, Cindy, Carrie, something with a C though, right? So, when she finally gets the chance to talk to the police and be part of the investigation, she jumps at it. Unfortunately, Cassandra isn't much help to the investigators. She leaves the party at 2 a.m., just 40 minutes before I die, leaving me alone with a group of guys who've brought along some tranquilizers. Sitting next to them felt like being stuck in a fever dream where Jacques Derrida explains quantum physics at a frat party. At some point, I decided it was time to head back. One of the guys casually asked if I needed someone to walk with me, and I said yes, but no one moved. I glanced back, the campsite faintly visible through the cold, white light filtering through the pines. It was only a few meters away, just beyond the trees. I'd walked this path for days, never once feeling threatened by the shadows in the bushes. But tonight, that sinking feeling in my stomach wouldn't go away. Still, I refused to be that girl. The one who got scared at every creak in the dark. The one who needed someone to hold her hand for a few steps. So I stood up and said I'd walk alone. Instead of sticking to the dark trail, though, I decided to take a small detour along the riverbank, a bit longer, a bit lighter, and hopefully a bit safer. One of the guys told me to text him when I made it to my tent, but when I didn't, no one even noticed. 16 days after my death, suspicion begins to shift toward our biology teacher. Devin, one of my classmates, reveals that he had felt ill that night and went looking for the teacher's tent, only to find it empty. Soon after, the teacher's behavior takes a strange turn. He starts making inconsistent statements that don't add up. One day, he calls Zoe into his office after class, where he insists that his earlier proposal to her, before the trip, had been nothing but a joke. She understood that, right? It was sarcasm, he says, claiming that what he really meant was that if she wanted to improve her grades, she should consider attending a tutoring service. And this is where Cassandra steps in for the final time. She confesses that she visited our biology teacher after the party and that they went to the boathouse where, according to her, nothing bad happened. He was just there for me. The biology teacher is immediately suspended, but the case against him has nothing to do with mine, as Cassandra's alibi clears him. Meanwhile, the suspicions surrounding Zoe and Tom are too weak to pursue. My case remains unsolved, and eventually people begin to accept the idea that it was just a tragic accident, that I must have hit my head when I jumped into the water. They agree that I seemed unhappy, not just that night, but in general, and that my relationship with my parents, who expected me to excel in everything, was strained. Perhaps the pressure had finally got to her. It's all unsatisfying, of course. Unsatisfying for the local magazine, whose updates eventually dry up. Unsatisfying for the police, left with yet another unsolved case on their desk. Unsatisfying for my parents, who, decades later, will say in an interview that not a day goes by that they don't think of their little girl. Maybe one day, a classmate will write a college essay about my case, reflecting on how it taught them that life can end in an instant. Maybe my story will end up on a true crime podcast, or perhaps Netflix will stretch it into a tightly structured 8-episode miniseries where my body is discovered just 3 minutes in. Enough time for viewers to decide if they'll keep watching. Or maybe none of this happens and I'll fade away, like countless other women who are silenced every day simply for being born the wrong sex. It doesn't matter who profits from my story. It doesn't even matter if they eventually find the 2 men I crossed paths with on my way back to the campsite, in the wrong place at the wrong time. None of this matters, because in the end, I'm just another dead girl underwater. I won't be home for Christmas. Life can be messy, complicated, difficult. Sometimes you can just lose yourself in all of it, and in the process, you can lose sight of the things that actually matter. And then one day a storm comes out of the clear blue sky, and you get blown overboard by the tempest, and all is lost in the blink of an eye. This is what happened to me. I just got caught up in all of the things that don't really matter. Money, career status, an address in the right part of town and elite private schools for the kids, and new luxury import autos, and Swiss-made wristwatches with tasteful but recognizable brand logos. Material things. Then came a day when I realized how unimportant it all was, but it was too late. Still, at first I tried to keep up the pretense of normality in the face of immeasurable loss. I had already bought the 12-foot Douglas fir Christmas tree and put up the holiday decorations all around the house. Family was flying in from 3 different states to visit for the holiday. I had arranged car service from the airport for everyone, a catered gourmet dinner for Christmas Eve, nice gifts for all, and I even took the time to memorize a heartwarming toast to the whole family before we sat down to eat. In the end, I had to just junk this because of the references to my wife and children. More than that, really. It just didn't work at all anymore. What was I supposed to do? I felt some strange obligation to appear unfazed, composed, in control of my emotions and my world. I don't know. That has always been my way, or at least the image I have always wanted to project. It's hard to say how much of it was ever truly real, and how much I just manufactured, for whatever reason. And it doesn't matter any longer anyway. It all happened on the evening of December 23rd, and everyone was flying in the next day. I was just numb afterwards, and didn't have the time or motivation for all the phone calls before those flights took off in the morning. so I was left with no choice but to inform everyone of what happened when they arrived at our house that day. My house. Once they were all there, and I had dodged the uncomfortable questions for as long as I possibly could, I gave a very different and mostly improvised speech from the one I had originally planned. Somehow, I made it to the end with dry eyes, though no one else did. I cried enough the previous night at the hospital. I wasn't sad anymore. I was just angry now. Well, folks, it seems that everyone has had a chance to grab a beverage, and although we are not fully gathered together as a family right now, I would like to proceed with some very unfortunate news that I have to share at this time. Not exactly a toast. Nothing like a toast, actually. The opposite of a toast. Just some words I have to say. I took a deep breath and a long, slow sip of my Macallan scotch. I felt all the eyes on me, and I thought about what I should say, what I could say. I hadn't planned this out. I tried. I just couldn't. I want to thank you all for coming this far to spend the Christmas holiday with us, but I am afraid that us is just me now. Yesterday evening, around 6:30 p.m., Melanie and the kids were driving home from the mall down the road when they were T-boned at the intersection of Torrance and Sepulveda by a 25-year-old off-duty sheriff's deputy named Kyle Langtree, who ran a red light. All three of them were killed, but the sheriff's deputy, driving a large SUV, only sustained a concussion and some minor injuries. He is still in St. Mary's right now, but expected to be released within a day or two. I paused and drained off the rest of my scotch. Everyone stared at me, their faces fixed in various expressions of shock and horror and disbelief, the tears already starting to fall. Hands were raised to cover mouths. I took another deep breath and continued, not even knowing what to say next, only knowing that I had to say something. I kind of muttered the next part down towards my shoes. The local news channels are all reporting that this sheriff's deputy had just left a holiday party at a bar down the street, and the LAPD officer who was first on the scene breathalyzed this guy, and he apparently blew a 1.8 BAC, more than twice the legal level for DUI. When the LAPD cop radioed this in, he was advised that this sheriff's deputy was the younger brother of both the local DA and the U.S. congressman representing this district. This was picked up over the police scanners used by several local news outlets. Instead of being taken to jail, he was taken to St. Mary's, like I said. Apparently, he also had 2 prior DUIs that were both dismissed for no apparent reason. You can read about it all here in today's paper if you want. Front page. I dropped a copy of the local newspaper on the table. I paused again. I didn't know what else to say. My older brother Jamie came up and gave me a powerful hug and whispered some kind words in my ear and cried some tears onto my neck and collar. My Aunt Jane approached me, but then stopped, not knowing what to do. I didn't blame her. I didn't either, but I did my best. You are all my dearest friends and family, and I thank you all so much for coming to be here. I am just so sorry that it has come under these terrible circumstances. I set my empty glass on a coaster on the table. Somehow it was still important for me to appear unrattled, composed. The coaster was somehow still important. We all have to do what we all have to do for the love of our family, and you have all shown and proven that by being here right now. I love you all dearly, and I'm so sorry to have to share this terrible news with you at this time. I pretended to get choked up. Then I lowered my head and excused myself and went to my bedroom to get what I needed as my family broke out in open gasps and cries and barely restrained sobs and sorrows in the living room. I quietly slipped out the side door and drove my Mercedes AMG GT to St. Mary's Hospital. I parked it in a handicapped spot when I got there. I wouldn't be needing it any longer. I decided to leave it to my nephew Nicholas once I had a chance to meet with my lawyer. He was a good kid who just graduated from Penn State, and I knew he loved that car. He deserved it. I decided to set him up with some cash too, just to help him get started. You never know what life has in store for you. I certainly didn't, and that's how I ended up here, sitting in this small cell in the LA County Jail, spending Christmas Day all by myself, eating a bologna sandwich for dinner, or trying to anyway. I don't have much appetite. This is the first time in my entire life that I have spent Christmas alone. I will be on suicide watch for the next 48 hours, and after that, the wheels and gears of the legal system will make their slow and inevitable turns, and I will end up in Pelican Bay or San Quentin or someplace like that for the rest of my life. Murder 1, assault with a deadly weapon, menacing, illegal parking in a designated handicap space. Haha. They have me. They have me dead to rights. They have me on video for all of it. I don't care. It was unfortunate that I had to put down that security guard who tried to stop me from reaching Deputy Langtree's hospital room, though. I shot low, in the center of his thigh. Hopefully he will be okay. Hopefully I missed the femoral artery. I tried my best, but it all happened pretty fast and I'm no marksman. It could have been worse, I guess. At least he was already in a level 1 trauma unit. Young guy. I feel bad about that part. They won't tell me anything about how he's doing, or if he has a wife and kids or anything like that. I hope he's okay. I will leave some money for him too once I meet with my lawyer and update my last will and testament, for whatever that might be worth. I don't know what else I can do. I just feel really bad about it. I never wanted to hurt anyone else. Anyway, they can't keep me on suicide watch forever. And like I said, we all have to do what we all have to do for the love of our family. I did what I had to do for the love of my family. I have no regrets. Anyone want the rest of this bologna sandwich? I'm not hungry. Merry Christmas. I think this one will probably be my last, but I hope you enjoy many more, engulfed in the warmth and love of all your family and friends. I just need to find a rope, a night out. It's 1:30 in the morning and the bass is hammering so hard I feel it beat in time with my heart. It could be my adrenaline. No one sees me. I'm invisible to them. I've always had the ability to make myself invisible. Most of my life was spent being invisible to others. It's a hell of a superpower right now. The lights are flashing and the beautiful bodies of strangers are grinding against each other to music. It's an odd mating ritual. I don't understand it. You get dressed up, made up, and go writhe against a stranger in the hopes of either getting laid or a prospect of getting laid at a later date. And maybe, just maybe, this night of painted-up grinding on a stranger will lead to a relationship. Isn't that how I got here, though? The bar is backlit, and the bottles glow with ephemeral promises of a good time. The floor is sticky, where hopeful patrons have bumped into each other or tried to maneuver around each other unsuccessfully. Hopes and dreams and promises all spilled out, laid bare, and left as a sticky residue on a dirty floor. I amble through the labyrinth of bodies attempting to make my way to the bathroom. I've been here before, to this club, not this situation, 1,000,000 times before. Wealthy frat boys and the girls that hope to marry them and become trophy wives congregate here. Beautiful people living beautiful Instagram lives, worshiping at the altar of materialism and lust. I used to belong here. Not that I fall into either category of wealthy frat boy or gold digger. I fell in between, a guest by proximity. Being beautiful has its advantages. Yet, even being beautiful, standing out just enough to get the invite, I blend in and go unnoticed. Except by her. She noticed me. Everyone noticed her. Tonight, I'm anything but beautiful. I'm caked in dirt and blood, a backpack on my shoulder. It's dark, and everyone is so self-absorbed or so intent on their mission of hooking up that they don't see me. The bouncer was so busy flirting with a hopeful girl trying to get in that he didn't even see me slip past him and through the door. I know I'm leaving a trail of evidence behind me. Flakes of dried blood and caked mud sloughing off with each step that I take. The vibration of the thrumming bass does nothing to help this. I'm careful to avoid the bar area where it is more lit up and I'm more prone to bump into someone and get noticed. But I'm invisible. I was invisible when I came in upon him tonight too. Her and him. He didn't see me coming. She did though. She always saw me. A group of gorgeous girls come tumbling out of the bathroom. The one in the middle rubs her nose and sniffles. It doesn't take a genius to know why. I move back into the shadows and avoid eye contact. They don't see me. I slip in and thank whichever gods that exist. The bathroom is blissfully empty. I throw the lock in place. Within seconds, someone is pounding on the door. It's ironic that this is where I ended up. It's where it started a year before. Her and I. Escaping into this bathroom, locking the door, her back against the wall. I throw my backpack on the floor and turn the faucet on. She fell in love with me. I fell harder. He never gave her up and refused to let her go. I begin to remove my blood and mud-caked clothes. I take care to put them in the trash can, moving around the other garbage so that they slip to the bottom. He promised her that he would always own her. She would always be his. We took our concerns to the cops. They didn't care. They didn't listen. He never stopped. According to the cops, his feelings were just hurt. He's a good guy with a promising future. He would eventually stop, they said. But he didn't. He wouldn't. I pulled the trash bags from the stalls and put it on top of the pile of garbage camouflaging my blood and dirt-covered clothes. I stick my head under the faucet and let the hot water run over my scalp and face. The way she touched my face or ran her fingers through my hair. The way she told me I was the most beautiful girl she's ever met. She saw me, really saw me. Being seen is a powerful drug. The mud and the blood rinse from my hair and face down the drain with my tears and with my hopes. This is not what I wanted to become. I didn't have a choice. He wouldn't stop. He wouldn't leave her alone. He wouldn't leave us be. I have to hurry and finish cleaning up before the last call. The hot water reminds me of the feeling of his hot blood on my hands. I didn't expect it to flow like that. Viscous and hot, and so much of it. There is more angry pounding on the door, shouting. I need to move faster. My eyes look dead. I watched his eyes as he died, as the light went out. I slick my hair back into a tight knot, reminiscent of an old Robert Palmer video. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Google it. It was iconic a million years ago. I've always loved the classics. So much more raw than today's auto-tuned bullshit. She loved to listen to the classics with me, laugh at the videos as we streamed them on our television. I add my heavy black eye makeup and dark burgundy lipstick. It looks dramatic against the paleness of my face. His face went pale as his eyes went dark and his blood drained so fast. I pull out a thin black tank top and black pants and throw them on. I rub the dirt and blood off of my chunky Doc Martens and throw on my necklaces. I look once more at my hands. Hands that just killed a man and dragged his body to a river and dumped him like trash, and make sure to clear any remaining residue from underneath my nails. He shouldn't have tried to do what he was about to do. Not to her. I wouldn't let that happen. He had to know I wouldn't let that happen. He had a death wish. The pounding on the door is getting more intense. I take a wet paper towel and clean up the flakes of mud and blood that fell around me as I cleaned myself up. I double-check that my clothes that I shed cannot be seen in the trash can. I check the sink. I check my makeup. Flawless. I open the door and make my way back through the crowd of angry girls who were made to wait. And she's there, waiting for me, against the bar, just like the first night where it all began. She watched me kill a man, and she is still here for me. She still loves me, because she knows I did it all for her, and I would do it again. The lights come on, letting everyone know it's time to go home. I notice that eyes fall on us, see us, as they adjust to the bright light. The music cuts off. The party is over. She takes my hand, and we make our way out in the crowd. No one will ever know, except for her and I.